So, Ms. Bauer, before we get started, we're going to confirm that Councillor Pratt's audio is working. I'm assuming that was done already.
Yeah, we did.
Councillor
Councillor Pratt, we'll just check your audio is working.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being
Great.
so accommodating.
Great. So, Councillor Pratt, just feel free to unmute yourself when I call your name to give you the floor. Just for everybody's information, a little bit of a different, we're going to try a different setup. We're going to try to use the keypad for voting and speaking for those of us that are here today, and then I'll keep an eye on Councillor Pratt for his hand is being up and his desire to speak, and we'll record his vote accordingly. Ms. Bauer, are you able to show me? So can you put your hand up, Councillor Pratt? I just want to make sure I'll be able to see that. No, the actual raise your hand within Zoom. Let's make sure the setup's working. Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. And take that down. Okay, so we'll get going. We're going to call to order the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, March 13th. And I would like to, of course, begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our special relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. With that, before we get a motion to adopt the agenda, I would like to move the agenda with the varied order for items P5 and P6 and P7 moved to the very end of the agenda after the conclusion of all other business. Can you get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Kunst. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries unanimously. Does everybody have that? Okay, so if you go to your agenda under other business, items P5, P6, and P7 will now be done at the very last portion of the regular meeting. Okay. And get a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of February 27th. Moved by Councillor Kuntz, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously. So move on to delegations. I understand Jim Armstrong is not available. So we have a Brian Godet or Godet. Is that correct? Please come forward. Turn your mic on.
Good afternoon.
No, just try to turn your, again, it's not really much of a touch screen, I keep saying. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor Woodward.
Don't have to lean that forward. If you sit back a little bit, it'll catch your voice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor Woodward, council members, township staff, and members of the public. My name is Brian Gadet, and I'm here from 2842 Watcom Road in Abbotsford. I'm appearing here this afternoon on behalf of Jim Armstrong from Armstrong Environmental Services. Jim apologizes for not being here in person. My appearance is related to soil deposit application for 27575 8th Avenue. I wish to make 2 points today as follows. We ask Council to revise our policy related to the bylaw requiring 67% favorable response to the application, and second, to forward this application to the ALC since it is a benefit to agriculture. I will not use Council's time to outline the importance of agriculture to the township and our province as a whole. That is a well-known fact. I will point out that this land is vastly underperforming from a production point of view. The berry plants have been planted 6 years ago, and according to the experts, the plants look like they were planted last month. Jim Armstrong is a qualified environmental professional with over 40 years' experience. It is his professional opinion that the land in its present state is close to and likely non-farmable for soil-based crops. We believe that the ALC and the Ministry of Agriculture look at all applications on land in the ALR from the following point of view. Does the application benefit agriculture? The agrologist report states that the site is a former gravel pit and the soils were heavily disturbed by aggregate mining and earth-moving activities. As a result, the soils have a Class 4 capability rating, and lands in this class have severe limitations that require special management practices, or the result will be severely limited range of crops due to high levels of coarse fragments or low available soil moisture holding capacity. As a result, the agrologist is absolutely certain that filling this site does benefit agriculture. At a recent council meeting, council asked staff if there are any reasons not to refer this application to ALC, and the staff response was there is no reason. Later in the same meeting, staff stated that the only reason not to refer the application to ALC is the wording in the current township policy. As a result, we conclude that the agrologist is correct and that filling this site with high-quality materials under his supervision will dramatically improve the agricultural productivity from this farm. The next question is related to the policy regarding 67% being in favor of the application. We know only 7 people responded to the survey. That's a very small sample size. But more importantly, at a recent council meeting, staff were asked why these 3 people did not support the application, and staff stated that no reason was provided. The owner of the property and the township have the ability to have a substantial impact on agriculture, on the agricultural production from this farm. We encourage council to set the policy aside and agree to send this application to ALC because it will benefit agriculture. On behalf of the property owner and Mr. Armstrong, we thank you for your time.
Any questions? Excuse me, if you come back, there's a question from council. Councilor Richter, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, I read that in the report that it's blueberry farming that's going to go in there. And what level or classification of soil do blueberries need? And how will we, I mean, it's 30,000 or 20,000 loads of dirt that are going in there. How will we know that it's good dirt?
Excellent question. First of all, a 2-part question. The higher the classification of the soil, the better the blueberry crop will be. So theoretically, taking it from a class 4 to a class 3 will improve, from a class 3 to a class 2, etc. So the higher the quality of the materials that go in, the better the class of the soil, as well as moisture content and things of that nature, will improve the ability for the production to increase. But there's no magic number that says, well, it has to be a 2 or a 1. The second part, all applications that you make to the ALC with the notice of intent require the agrologist to provide supervision. Okay? So in the notice of intent, you must outline where the material is coming from, the quality of the material, how it will be placed, etc. And and under the supervision of the agrologist. So ALC will expect the agrologist to be there on site and to produce a report thereafter saying that everything that was in the decision made by the ALC, that the agrologist agrees that it was completed as per the decision.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Councilor Van Popten?
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time going through your reports. I was actually very impressed with the amount of erosion and sediment control around the stream that's in the middle of the property. My question to you is what kind of maintenance requirements or supervision will they be to maintain that the mitigation that's in place or being built in place with the swales will be maintained throughout the lifespan of this farm? So, you know, if something goes through it and, you know, damages all of the, you know, the controls that are set back around that stream or that brook or the ditch or whatever we want to call it, what kind of guarantees are in place that it'll be maintained?
So, two-part answer. First of all, the first part, although not part of your question, was that the agrologist and the author of the ESC report will be on site to make sure that the filling takes place exactly according to the report. Okay. The second part, which is really the theme of your question, is after the site is filled and all the professionals have left the site, how do we make sure that this farmer abides by the township setbacks, the ALR setbacks, and the provincial setbacks? There is no magic answer to that question. I'm not going to try to fool you with a lot of words. It comes back to 2 things. One is the integrity of the farmer, And second of all, the controls placed by all the governing authorities to make sure that they follow those rules that every other farmer in British Columbia has to also face. I know that is not exactly what you're looking for, but that's the truthful answer.
Yeah, I guess with this one, it's just a little bit more challenging because it runs right through the center of the property. Whereas if it was like a stream on the side, you know, the chances of it getting damaged or the controls getting damaged is maybe a little bit less. But I appreciate the amount of effort that's gone into this application anyway. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So thank you for that, and then we'll be dealing with that and then a couple more items from the agenda. Thank you for
Thank you.
delegation. Next up is delegation by Mr. Baines. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Graham Watson, 20590 24th Ave. Cal was running a little late. He had a bit of a detour. I don't really want to take up any of his allotted time.
So what we can do then is just,
Oh, he's here.
he's here, okay? Great,
Thank you, guys.
thank you. Please come forward.
Thanks, Graham. So, good afternoon, respected mayor, councilors. My name is Cal Baines. I've spoken to some of you by email, telephone, and I thank you for your time. I'm here representing a group of neighbors for the LAS application SWR21-02, which you folks voted on last February 27th and rejected the bylaw, which was with respect to an increased cost on this project. As we all know, global inflation has changed a lot of pricing around the world, and it did in our projects as well. Just a little bit of a background on this project. We applied on March 2018 for the LAS project coming down 204 Street and across 24th Avenue to the elementary school. This application was held for almost 3 years, up to about June 2021. And the reason we were told was because there was an engineering consultation report in progress for the Brookswood area. And based on that result, they will pursue with the application. So we waited for almost 3 years. Finally, bylaw bylaw number 5768 was accepted in March of 2022. And like I said, bylaw 5847, which was an amendment to that bylaw, was for the sole purpose of the cost increase that the engineering department thought had happened. And with policy for LAS, when there's a 15%, as you know, difference in the costs, there has to be a repetition, or it has to be a total abolishment of the project. And your department, engineering, decided we're going to go for an LAS repetition. And I want to thank, before I go forward, Councillors Richter, Kunst, and Pratt for their support at the repetition as well. A couple of confusions that I have I just want to bring up. Councillor Ferguson did not reply to any of my phone calls or emails. And never in the past has he participated in this voting process for this petition, saying that this had a conflict of interest for him. So all of a sudden, though, now he's voted against this project. So I'm not sure how his conflict of interest now changed when he never supported it or even was against it before. He's against this project now. That's the point I'm asking for an answer. Like, how is his conflict of interest not the same as it was before? And Councillor Rint, I reached out, didn't hear back from him either by voicemail, phone, or email at all either. And Councillor Van Popta, she stated her disagreement with this project because of the fact that there's no future NCP in the Glenwood area where this LAS was going to be serving. Mayor Woodward, yourself, you voted in favor of this project since the first day. Back in 2021, specifically, you voted on October 4th, 2021, and when we had the request for the official petition, you supported it. Then in February 28th on 2022, for bylaw 5768, first, second, third readings, you again supported all of them. And then on March 7th, 2022, for the final adoption, you also supported that. Not to put you on the spot, but just trying to get an understanding of the sudden change in perception and support on this project. In our email conversations over the last 3 weeks, you have pointed to a couple of issues that are suddenly on the radar for you. Number one, will the proposed sewer line support future development since there's no NCP in the Glenwood area? And back in October 2021, the manager of engineering, Mr. Raman Safi, answered this specific question for for Councillor Richter, who asked back then how the proposed LAS can be affected by future density. And his answer, I won't go over it, but briefly was that that's what the OCP is for. That's what our planning department does. That's what engineering's job is, to prepare for the future and to build for the future. The second concept you had was there's no NCP in this area.
Just to interrupt you, so you have reached your 5 minutes, but if you have a few more points, I'll let you proceed. But
Okay.
I'd like you to sort of head towards the conclusion. If you
Okay, I'll quickly wrap up and just highlight a couple of things I wanted to say. No NCP, you mentioned. Again, Glenwood, we don't know what's happening with that, nor are we really concerned. That's the path the city wants to take. We as residents want an LAS for our sewer so we can live on the properties in updated amenities. There's an elementary school at the end of this project that is still sitting on septic. The poor children are playing in the playgrounds with the septic field around them. And the last thing I want to say, you also brought up the fact that there's a group of people on 206th Street that are heavily against this project. I understand that that group of people is consecutive homes of, I think, 6 property owners. And we, as the applicants, are open to discussion and even trying to be good neighbors to suggest that if they really don't want to be on here, take those 6 people out of here. And our vote will still be, you take those 6 X's or 6 non-supports out of here, our LAS support goes over 80% for the people that are supporting it. And, you know, at the end of the day, in closing, I'm asking for the democratic process to be upheld. We voted twice on this project, had your support. I'm asking for reconsideration of your non-passing of the last bylaw on February 27th, which was for the sole purpose of the increased cost. And in closing, a lot of property owners are here. You may want to stand up just to show your support, who's here. Just so you know that this is not a one-person project, it's a community. We're here for the betterment of our children, our grandparents who live on these properties. And I think that you should please reconsider the project that we proposed. And the only difference here is the cost. And we, the citizens, are willing to take on that extra cost. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you for
and
your
hopefully you guys will
delegation.
reconsider.
Not seeing any questions from council. Thank you for your delegation.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so moving on, we'll move on to D1, soil deposit application 27575 in 8th Avenue. There's a presentation from staff.
Thank you, through your worship. With us today is Mr. Richard Walfing, the Manager of Engineering Services. His department handles files such as the local air service, soil deposit, and capital projects.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. So the purpose of today's presentation is to present information on the soil deposit and removal policy. So in terms of an outline of what we will review today, we'll review the background to this policy. We'll take a look at some of the policy requirements. We'll review some of the previous applications that went through the process outlined in this policy. We'll present some potential amendments for the consideration of council for this policy. We'll present some summary information for the application at 27575 8th Avenue. And finally, there'll be an opportunity to ask us any questions. It should be noted that there was also a memo to council on this item today on the distribution list as item 7. So at the meeting of February 13th, council was considering an application for soil deposit at 27575 8th Avenue and passed the resolution as identified on the screen. That brings us to the presentation today on the soil deposit and removal policy, as well as some potential revisions. So there are 2 council-approved township documents that cover soil deposit and removal applications. The first being the soil deposit and removal policy, and the second being the soil deposit and removal bylaw. Most of this presentation will focus on the policy itself. The policy applies to applications that exceed 600 cubic meters. To put that into perspective, that's approximately 85 dump truck loads. The policy contains provision for public notification, a petition process, and a minimum support threshold, amongst others. It's also worth noting that council has adopted a standing resolution for all ALR soil or fill use applications that fall below the 600 cubic meter threshold. So in addition to the soil deposit removal policy, the township has also adopted a soil deposit and removal bylaw. This bylaw contains provisions for application and permit requirements, such as drawings, fees, and permit durations. It also includes a series of technical requirements, such as minimum setbacks, slopes, routing of trucks, and when technical reports are required by qualified professionals. It also contains a number of enforcement provisions for the bylaw. Staff are working on amendments to this bylaw to reflect some changes in the Agricultural Land Commission Act. This is a piece of provincial legislation. The purpose of these amendments would be to ensure that the language in the bylaw is consistent with those provisions. Property owners in the ALR who would like to deposit or remove soil require both authorization from the Agricultural Land Commission as well as the township in most circumstances. One of the key requirements in the Agricultural Land Commission Act and regulations is that soil or fill use applications on an ALR property require consideration by the local government prior to consideration by the Land Commission. If an application is not referred to the Land Commission by the local government, it would subsequently not be reviewed by the Land Commission. The remainder of this presentation will focus on the policy itself. So this slide presents an overview of the key provisions outlined in the soil deposit removal policy and also how those provisions have been amended over time. We have 3 main headings that cover the various items in the policy that fall under the categories of notification, the petition process, and the information session. The versions of the policy are shown in the rows on the left-hand side to provide some historical context for council. The initial version of the policy was adopted by council in 2010 and was an interim policy developed in response to concerns from the public over a number of soil deposit applications. This policy was focused on notifying neighbors of an upcoming application and included a requirement for an ad to be placed in a local paper, a sign to be posted on the property, typically a 4x8 sign similar to a land development application, as well as a notice to be placed on the township website. In addition, notification was provided by the township to neighbors for 5 parcels each way or to 100 meters. In the 2013 version of the policy, or the second row, the notification requirements for newspaper ads, a sign being placed on the property, and a website notice was maintained. In addition to this, a petition process was added to the policy. This consisted of a letter being sent to surrounding property owners within 1.6 kilometers of the property, along with a voting slip or a petition form that was to be sent back to the township to indicate whether surrounding property owners were generally in support of the application. The support threshold noted in the policy, or the level of support generally required for council to support an application, was set at 80%. In the 2015 version of the policy, or the third row, a requirement for a public information session was added for any application exceeding 10,000 cubic meters. This information session is organized by township staff at the cost of the applicant. The requirements for notification and the ballot area and support threshold for the petition remained at 1.6 kilometers and 80%. In the 2019 version, or the fourth row, and the current version of the policy, the requirements were relaxed somewhat and the petition process was reduced to 1 kilometer and a 67% support threshold. This slide provides council with the history of the applications over the last 5 years that have gone through the petition process identified in the policy applicable at that time. Some background information for each application is presented in the first 3 rows of the table, while the response rate is indicated on the fourth row. So the response rate would be the percentage of property owners who were sent a petition or a ballot that did respond. The average response rate for these petitions has been approximately 22% over the last 5 years. Of those residents who responded, the percentage of residents in support of an application is shown in the fifth row, with the required support level identified in the policy at that time indicated in the sixth row. The council decision for each application is shown on the last row of the table. It is worth noting that council has unfettered discretion when considering applications and is to consider each application on its own merits. The color coding on the table shows which applications have met the required threshold as well as the resulting decision. To date, council has passed or referred every application that proceeded through the petition process, despite only one application meeting the required support level as identified in the policy at the time of consideration. On this side, we have some potential policy amendments for council consideration. If these policy amendments were adopted, it will result in a policy similar to the 2010 version of the policy. The table presented shows a comparison to the current version of the policy. In terms of changes, staff would recommend maintaining a notification to surrounding property owners within a 1 kilometer radius. In addition, staff would recommend maintaining the notification requirement for newspaper ads, signs, and a website notice. These items have been very consistent in the policy over time. In terms of the petition process itself, staff would suggest eliminating this requirement. Other jurisdictions do not have this process, and the consistency between applications that meet the required level of support and those that are subsequently supported or passed is not present based on recent applications. Staff would recommend maintaining the process where any formal feedback that is received, such as response letters to a mail-out, are included in council reports similar to the current requirements. With regards to the requirement for a public information session, staff would recommend eliminating this requirement. There's been a total of 2 applications that have required this session, and a total of 3 attendees were present at these sessions. This does not seem to be the most effective use of delivering information or obtaining feedback for soil deposit and removal applications. All of these sessions were communicated to surrounding property owners in advance, advertised in the local paper, conducted in locations in proximity to the subject property, and conducted outside of regular business hours to maximize potential attendance. Another recommendation would be to amend the definition of a surrounding property owner. Currently, any properties exempt from taxation are not sent a notification letter or included in the petition process. Having staff go through each property to confirm taxation status takes a significant amount of time and does not seem to be a beneficial addition to the process. As an example, on the subject application on 8th Avenue, The properties across the street are owned by Metro Vancouver, so they were not included in the process, even though the truck traffic will be directly across the street. Staff would also recommend some wording be added to the policy to require a summary drawing to be prepared by the applicant or their qualified professional, along with a site plan, proposed deposit areas, watercourses, and fill depths. Through experience gained over the previous applications, staff has tracked the types of questions that are typically received on these applications. In the most recent applications, this information has been included in the notification and petition process, and this has reduced the amount of questions that were subsequently received. So in conjunction with the recommendation for maintaining a notification process, formalizing the requirement for a summary drawing would provide residents with more information on these applications to address the typical questions that have been previously received. This slide presents some summary information on the application at 27575 8th Avenue. We have a site plan shown in the main portion of this slide. And to orientate ourselves, we have north heading to the left of the page, 8th Avenue on the right-hand side of the page, and the municipal boundary, or what would be 276th Street on the top version of the page, top side of the page. The purpose of the application, as proposed by the applicant, is to fill a former gravel pit to create a more usable land for blueberry operations. The application volume is 212,000 cubic meters, or to put that into perspective, approximately 30,300 dump truck loads. As per the application, any loaded trucks would come from Abbotsford to the east via 8th Avenue and would be sent out to the west and then subsequently towards Highway 1. So a potential resolution has been included on this slide for the consideration of council, and would be to direct staff to bring forward any amendments to the soil deposit and removal policy and the bylaw as previously mentioned, as those amendments are in progress.
All right, thank you for that. Appreciate that. How many presentations have you given on the soil deposit policy?
I would guess it's been about 3 to date, so. I started with it in 2016.
Yeah. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the time that you've clearly put into reviewing what seems to be working and what isn't working and where changes are needed. I'm coming at this from a historical perspective because, of course, I was on all the councils that went through this. And the impetus for the need for this was the excessive use of ALR properties for getting rid of soil coming from other areas in the Lower Mainland. It was basically, they were farming soil. They weren't farming anything else. So my question, I've got a few questions here, but my first question is, putting the petition process in was because of the extreme concern that neighbors to the property felt over excessive numbers of dump trucks coming up and down their road. Now, you've indicated here in the report that it's 30,300 single dump trucks. How long would it take for all those dump trucks to dump? Like, I'm talking, are we talking a month? Are we talking 3 years? Like, what kind of a time frame are we looking at that could be upsetting to neighbors?
Yeah, we haven't, for that particular application, we have not worked with the applicant to confirm the exact timing. That being said, soil deposit permits are issued for a 1-year duration. They are possible to be extended, but it would depend on the rate at which soil became available for that particular application. And typically the dump trucks would be traveling in the more summer months as opposed to the winter months. So typically we do not see a lot of soil deposit activity in the rainy winter months, just due to the extra ESC measures that are required and just the ability to deposit. But it would really depend on the rate at which soil could be obtained for that extent of volume. So
okay, and as I recall, there were a lot of concerns from residents at the time about foundations cracking and other related disturbances to their properties just because of the sheer volume of trucks on those local roads. So I guess I'm concerned because your threshold for the policy is anything over 10,000. This is like 3 times that, well, more than that. It's significantly higher than the threshold. So I'd be concerned about dropping the petitioning part. The other question that I had is with regards to the current one. Did they hold a public information meeting? I can understand why maybe in-person meetings aren't working very well, but what about another option like a Zoom meeting or a webinar or?
So in terms of the application for 8th Avenue, and just to clarify, the policy actually applies to any application over 600 cubic meters. The requirement for a public information session is over 10,000. So the policy actually applies even for 600. Yes, they did hold a public information session. It was actually held at the Kinsman Center a couple months ago. With regards to the just the question in terms of the number of applications or the impacts to adjacent properties, and in previous years, I concur that there was a concept of fill farming. It wasn't farming of agricultural crops. The ALC, it should be noted, has also tightened up their rules and regulations to limit the amount of activities that are permitted for soil or fill use. So they've produced a number of policies and interpretation documents in the meantime that has also drastically reduced the number of applications that are passed and accepted there as well.
Okay, because that was one of the concerns as well, that the type of fill that was coming in was dirty fill, and that was affecting the water supplies and the farming on the neighboring properties. So I guess from my perspective, all I'm saying is we spent a lot of time in the past having to put this in place because there was so much upset in the community. I'm thinking that what you're proposing here is maybe stepping it back to what it was pre-2010 too quickly. Maybe we should leave a petition in, and maybe we should leave an information meeting in for those very large fill areas anyway. That would be my comments on it. So bringing it forward as you've suggested, I probably won't support that, not because you haven't done the work on it, but just because I'm concerned that the community issues will resurface as a result of us getting rid of some of those safeguards that were put in place back then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Always learn so much from these types of things. One of my questions was already answered, and that's the quality of the fill, and so you've answered that. The other one was I've never really understood why when we petition and then we count someone who doesn't respond as a yes or as not in favor. Does that come into this policy? Is that something that, are we changing that? Because
Mr. Welfing, you may want to go over that. I know we have different procedures and policies that define non-response differently, so let's maybe go over that again.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up this slide. So when
We're not able to see it, so I'm not sure what slide you're trying to show us.
well, we have that's okay.
Sorry about that. So I wanted to go back to this slide to clarify. Nope. That one. To clarify how the support level was counted. So in the 2013 version, where it is noted at 80% support level, in that version of the policy, people who did not respond were counted as a no,
Right.
that they were not in support. In all other versions past that, it's been whoever responds, we calculate a response rate on those people. So if you don't respond, they're just counted as did not respond. They're neither a yes nor a no. They are just did not respond. And the percent support is calculated of the people that did respond.
Yeah, so, I mean, that makes more sense to me. If someone doesn't respond, then we don't count them, not as a against. So, yeah, anyway, it's just something that we can, I guess, work on, I suppose, or vote on.
Councillor Bailey?
I'm looking at your truckloads here, and then you look at the page that has background, and that's a tandem unit. When you're talking about truckloads, are you talking about a single or a tandem?
A single box.
Thank you.
You. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Welfing, for coming, if I may, through the chair. The purpose of the application is to fill a formal gravel pit. And I think you're aware in that area, both Abbotsford side and our side, there were a number of gravel pits. And then my question to you is, you're dealing with the regional district. At one time, the regional park, the Aldergrove Lake Regional Park or Aldergrove Regional Park, had an actual operating gravel pit on the Abbotsford side. Is that not correct?
I think you might have more history on that than I potentially do.
Sorry, okay. So yes, that's the case. In a way, even though it's 30,300, you probably take into consideration what was there in the past. Also, the road as well, and the type of road and the type of traffic that's already moving along that. Abbotsford has still existing truck routes for gravel, and they have a gravel operation. So do you take that into consideration, the road network, when you're looking at these type of things?
Correct. So the highway and traffic bylaw would require that any trucks traveling to and from a site travel on truck routes, designated truck routes. 8th Avenue would be a designated truck route. So they would be entering on a designated truck route and then leaving via designated truck route as well before they made their way back to Highway 1.
Thank you, Mr. Wakeling. An excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, this was excellent. Thank you for your time on this. So looking at this spreadsheet that you've got here on the next page, it actually totals up the amount of times that the council decision. So what I read here is that regardless of the outcomes of the petition, we always tend to pass these on to the ALC anyways. So clearly petitioning is not working. But I do hear what Councillor Richter is saying with still having safeguards in mind. And I think that if we can, still maybe send out the petitions and collect them, but not have them as a part of the policy for governing whether you recommend that an application goes through or not. Because I think for me, when I saw this first application come through, it says not recommended, that staff doesn't recommend this application, and it's based on the policy. So that was kind of like, oh, wait, if staff's not recommending it, then should I be? But if we can have the numbers of petitions that go out, the numbers of response, and then the yeses or nos, then I think it would be a better understanding for us to be able to, at least if we have that information, to judge if there's an overall, like if 50% of the people come back and say, I'm not in favor, and of those 50%, 50% actually respond, and of those 50%, 100% don't, at least we have a better understanding of what the community is dealing with. If they're not responding and they're not interested and they're not saying no, then why should we have a policy in place that's not working anyway? So I appreciate this statistical information.
Mr. Welving, maybe you could comment a little bit on that. Like, what would be a potential, I know we'll come back to the motion and the recommended motion in a moment, but what would be just to respond to that, a possible process for staff to sort of say, council should consider this and here's the information? That would be one alternative to, a recommendation in favor or not in favor.
It's an excellent question. It's one we get periodically. And I think what staff is suggesting here is that there's a desire to have a policy that more closely aligns to what council has adopted in the past and what they would like to have moving forward. One of the things I didn't talk about in the presentation but was included in the memo is just the purpose of the policy was brought in to provide guidance both to township staff as well as also guidance to applicants and potential applicants as to how applications would be considered, so that there was some level of predictability for potential applicants, and that the surrounding residents also had some level of assurance as to how council would would consider those applications. So that was kind of the impetus coming back to Councillor Richter's comment is with the previous, prior to the policy, there was no level of guidance provided there. The challenge, of course, has been that the guidance that was put into the policy hasn't necessarily been followed by the respective decisions that have been made. So ideally, we would like to have a policy that aligns those levels of decisions with what's actually written in the policy. That would provide more consistency for staff as well as the surrounding public to have confidence in that policy and that it's being followed.
Councillor Bob, do you have any follow-up to that?
No, I'm good, thank
All right,
you.
Great. Can you, just before you wrap up, can you bring back the slide that has the motion on it, please? I have a question about that. Yeah, there. Bring forward amendments. So do you have any context for council to maybe process this motion, forward amendments of what nature and what general direction? I'm not trying to put you on the spot or write a report on the fly for me, but just generally sense of what council would expect this to lead to.
Yeah, so with regards to that question, thank you, Your Worship. We, subject to further feedback from council, we would propose to bring forward the amendments that we had identified in this presentation, and they were also more fully articulated in the memo to council on the distribution list today. So that was the intent, subject to feedback from council in any particular direction for those amendments.
All right, so I think you would be following the direction of the memo, which I did read this morning, generally bringing back for draft amendments, and you would have rationale for each amendment council could consider at that time, separate from maybe processing this application today. Yeah, all right. And I had one other further point. Do we still have the problem technically within the policy that the one we dealt with last term, where it was adjacent to Highway 1 and people on the other side of the highway were voting against it, driving down the number? Do we still have that? Do we still have that issue embedded in the policy?
We do. So it surrounding property owner goes to 1 kilometer.
Yeah.
In this particular application, we did not send it into Abbotsford. It is clarified that it is for Township of Langley residents, but it's not bounded by any arterial roadway or anything of that nature.
And I think I'd want to put that just on your radar, maybe consider it or don't, but I don't think we have to make it official to process that. But I did notice that was one of the reasons, one of the lower numbers, I believe, if I recall, did go ahead, is that people on the other side of Highway 1 were directly, obviously not affected in any way whatsoever. We're opposing the application. So I want to thank you for your presentation. If there's any more questions on this motion, maybe you'll just hang around for a bit, but I think for now we'll have council maybe see if it wants to consider this motion and the application. So thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to council. Does anyone in council wish to move this recommended motion? Moved by Councillor Van Popt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kunst. So is there any discussion on this? Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment that an information session be retained for soil volumes over 10,000 cubic meters.
So we could certainly process that. I have no problem with that if we could have some rationale, but I'll take that amendment. Is there a seconder to that amendment? No, not seeing. Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Open secondary motion. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just, as I said in my previous comments, there was a lot of time spent on this in the past. There was a lot of angst in the community. I just don't want to see that angst come back. It's not fair to the residents that live around these deposit areas if they're not aware of what's happening. So we can try going away from the petition right now, which I don't agree with, but maybe we could try it and see if we get fallout from it. But at least there should be some sort of an information session so that people can raise their concerns and get answers.
Yeah, so it would be my hope that we would retain, or at least have staff weigh in on the petition process, but not necessarily have it inform our recommendation. Councillor Pratt, you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I kind of share some of Councillor Richter's concerns, but I think coming at it from a different point of view, I myself would prefer to see some component of the petition system retained, just so that we have some information on what the feeling is in the neighborhood. But the public information meetings, we all know how much staff time and cost is associated with running these meetings, and I just don't feel like we're getting the value in terms of community engagement that we should be. So I don't know if I want to keep the informal information meetings, but the actual petition process is something I'd be more interested in keeping into the system. So I'll be curious to see what kind of amendments come forward out of that.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't have any challenges here with retaining the public information meeting for staff's review. With that, I'll call the question. D. Not a touch screen. And that carries with Councillor Van Popta opposed. Councillor Pratt, you're in favor. You didn't register
Opposed.
opposition. You're opposed to that. So that carries with Councillor Van Popta and Councillor Pratt opposed. So back to the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
You had mentioned about retaining some sort of petition. I'm in favor of having some sort of a petition, maybe just as a form of information for council.
Yeah, so I would be, if there's a draft amendment that suggests eliminating the petition as it comes back to Councillor Richter, I don't think I'd be supportive of that without some alternative public engagement mechanism. So do you want to wait for the report and review it then, or would you like to embed it in the motion now?
Well, I would hate to see staff put a policy together that we're just going to send back to them to revise because it didn't contain a petition.
I think they've heard that.
Process.
Hopefully they wouldn't do that. But if it does come back, we could certainly look at that at the time and refer it back. We don't see many of these. We could probably try to get this amended up by the summer, potentially.
Okay, so how about if I put forward an amendment that says that staff retain some sort of a petition process, especially for large applications over 10,000 meters?
Do you mind if we, before you move that, do you mind removing the 10,000? Just have staff come back with some options about retaining the petition process?
Okay,
Can
I
we
can do that.
You move that. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Open up a secondary motion. Ms. Bauer, can you read back the amendment just to clarify that we have what the movers intended?
The motion was to retain a petition process or have staff come back with suggestions for it. It did not include the 10,000.
Does that sound correct, Councillor Richter?
That's fine,
Great.
thank you.
Any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. And that carries unanimously. Councillor Pratt, I'm just going to ask you in the future, if you are opposed, if you could just register and say opposed, and that way we don't have to carry on. So back to the main motion as amended. Is there any other discussion on the main motion as amended? Seeing none, I'll call the question. That carries unanimously. So still on D1, is there anyone in council who would like to move the recommendation to not refer? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone who wishes to make a motion to refer?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there anyone in discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on D1 to refer. That carries unanimously. Moving on to reports to council. E1, development variance permit application number 100154. Copeland, to Kenneth Copeland Ministries to authorize a development variance permit. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion? Sorry, Councillor Richter, can you do that again? Yeah. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I had a question here on public input. In this particular area of the township, it's up on 93rd at 201. It's a pretty busy area, and I'm just wondering about reducing the number of parking spots needed, if that's going to create problems for other area businesses or residents, and if we should be asking for some sort of public input here.
I'll pass that on. Mr. Richardson, do you want to try to address that?
Thank you, Worship. In this case, the proponents provided qualified professionals indication that the peak demand would be 24 stalls, whereas 33 are being provided. So staff has reviewed that, doesn't object to it, and doesn't, based on that review, anticipate there being the challenge.
Okay, but there's not been a cafe in there before. It was a bookstore. I can see bookstores maybe not being as busy as cafes might be.
Mr. Richardson, I believe that the variance reduction had some rationale around business hours or other operating considerations that I think you reviewed.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councilor Richter, correct. It specifically reviewed as from recollection, a staff commuter survey, which I think came out as 16 stalls required for the staff members there, as well as you noted, the nature itself of the cafe, the hours of the cafe, as well as the patrons.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Richter, Councilor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. The cafe that's proposed, is that an allowable use by right in the either industrial zone or the comprehensive development zone that pertains to the site, or are we going to have to see another rezoning application to allow the cafe?
Mr. Richardson, you can just confirm.
Through your worship, the first, it's a permitted use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity a number of months ago to visit this site and location, and I was somewhat impressed by the amount of time, energy community support they have. So it's a valid project for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on E1. That carries unanimously. Moving on to E2, development permit application number 101283. Development permit for 86th Avenue and 200th Street. Moved by Councilor Ferguson, seconded by Councilor Kunst. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call the question on E2.
Your Worship.
Oh, see, I got to check Zoom all the time. There we go. Go ahead, Councilor Pratt.
Sorry about that.
Nope. No problem.
Yeah, thank you. And through yourself to staff, or perhaps, Your Worship, you can answer this. Just in regards to the school district students calculation, I know this conversation's come up in the past, but I'm just curious to know if there's any work being done to ensure the accuracy of these calculations as it pertains to multifamily developments like this. I live in a condo myself, and I can attest to the fact there's a lot more kids in there that I think the calculation would have made in the first place. So I'm just wondering if there's any work at the school board level in regards to that.
Yeah, not that I've heard of. Mr. Richardson, we tend to leave that to our school district partners. You go ahead and confirm that, I guess.
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's simply provided for your information, Councilor Pratt. Certainly can follow up with district staff or trustees directly. Yep, thank you. So I'm going to call the question on E2. That carries unanimously. Moving on to E3, 2022 general election. Just get a motion to receive. Moved by Councilor Van Popta. There's a seconder to receipt. Someone's got to second it. Seconded by Councilor Pratt. There we are. There's any discussion on this report? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E3. Somewhat unfortunate for sure. So E4, report to Council, Agricultural Land Commission application 100424 regarding a referral to the ALC to allow non-farm use for filming activities in North Langley. Is there a mover? Moved by Councilor Richter, seconded by Councilor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on E4? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E4. And that carries unanimously. Moving on to E5, update of the 2023 to 2027 findings. Get a motion to receive, and then we can discuss the report after that. Moved by Councilor Van Popta, seconded by Councilor Kunst, just to call the question on receipt. That carries unanimously. Is there any discussion on E5? Councilor Richter.
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled as to why we're receiving this and not taking any action. Second thing is why, I'm not sure we had a follow-up workshop on some of the questions anyway.
Mr. Backen, do you want to review the process just for council before we continue?
And well, maybe I'll go through the rest of my questions. The Grant Ward Airport Park, I'd like to add that one back in, if it's not in. And the second thing is, I noted on one of the pages here, page E5, or page 5 of E5, establishing a library reserve fund. And that's the major component of the costs here, and I'm just wondering what this is for.
Yes, I did want to sort of review the process a bit first, Mr. Bracken, before we get into some of the details of why it's a receipt at this time, and that your anticipation of a first and second reading bylaw, I believe, at the next meeting of council. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. So perhaps to step back and then to let Ms. Ruff actually comment as well. This is a here for information. It's a bit of a different process we're following this year. As you may recall, our original projections indicated that there was some challenges with the inflation rate and whatnot. So we've come up with a number that I think is close to our what our, I guess, objectives were, just 4.92%. And in doing so, we're trying to actually adjust on the fly in terms of our process to make that achievable. The biggest changes I think we're looking at is that we have, I guess, constrained our services somewhat. We certainly haven't added any at the staff level. The council certainly has and should as we go through and look at the priorities. But on the capital side, we're actually realigning, I guess, our reserves to have fewer, I guess, envelopes, and then in this process to allow for the creation of envelopes from which future capital expenditures will be made. So at this point, the budget would actually be having envelopes as opposed to specifics, so the council has the maximum flexibility in determining how those envelopes should be actually spent and allocated. In regards then to the ward, actually the airport park as we call it, we have not, I don't believe, included that because that was suspended by a previous council resolution. So to put that back in would require a further direction from council. And in terms of the library reserve fund, that's ostensibly in place because as we go forward and build new libraries, whether it be freestanding or as part of other facilities, it is our responsibility and cost to outfit those or put in what's called the FF&E, the furnishings, fixtures, equipment, and I'd add to that books that have to be made part of that process. So at the present time, we're trying to build a bit of a reserve so we would have the ability to fund some of those elements in future, I guess, buildings, structures, or what may be coming. But I know Sandra has a bit more detail then in terms of some of the budget fine points. Sandra?
Yeah, I think you've captured the majority of it. We have made changes to reduce it down to 4.92%, and we started much higher than that, and that was our direction. So at this point, we're just looking for input and then to direction to go to public.
Yeah, so just Mr. Bracken or Ms. Ruff, just if there's no further direction, it'll go to the public and it'll come back as a bylaw. I believe the target is April 3rd. Correct. So I think it would be appropriate at that time for council to move amendments to the bylaw in regards to either adding projects or adding other taxation or reducing taxation at that time.
Oh, okay, well, so I just have a point of clarification here.
Of course, yeah.
Because I'm not understanding. We received this. That's all we've done. Are we actually saying by receiving it, we're telling staff to go ahead and put a 4.92% tax increase in?
What that's outlined within the staff report, that staff would proceed to take that to the public for consultation and bring it forward under this form for a bylaw on April 3rd. That's correct. That's what's in the report, Councillor Richter.
Okay, then I voted wrong on that. I don't support a 4.92% tax increase, and I'd like to have my vote changed to oppose.
Madam Clerk, can we just want us to re-vote? You want us to re-vote? So I have to move reconsideration, or someone has to move reconsideration? I don't have any problem with it. We'll just I'll move it then.
Yeah, Your Worship, not so much on that point, but just more the process.
Yeah.
Why it's for receipt is at this point, council's not endorsing any tax increase or anything of that nature. We're going to go to the public first now. We would then bring that public information back, and at that point we'd be looking for council's direction. So it's certainly appropriate to reconsider the vote, but the process we have is trying to give council the most flexibility within the parameters they've set. And of course, as was referenced, we haven't totally met that because I think the original parameters were around 4%. The difference is a different approach to capital. We're not funding capital in the traditional way, and as well, some significant, I guess, reduction in terms of some of the operating costs where we can do so, that, as we've talked about before, could impact services depending upon the direction of council.
Yeah, so just Councilor Ritter, I'll come back to you in a moment. Just so to confirm, though, that if a member of council doesn't want to receive the report, I'll certainly allow them to not receive it.
No, I don't want staff to take a 4.92% out to the public for feedback right now. I don't, this process is changed substantively, I think, from what we've done in the past. And there are still questions that I have on this. For example, what borrowing is anticipated here? How much are we going to borrow and for what? You're talking about these envelopes, but where's the funding for the envelopes coming from? Secondly, well, I'll go back to the Grant Ward Airport Park. I think that we may have suspended it, but I believe we did pass another resolution at the time that said to scale it back to what it was originally set to be, which I believe was $125,000. And then there's some categories in here. One-time additional retro provision for 2022, and this is under the universal. What's this for? And the same thing, a one-time additional retro provision for utilities. Again, what's it for?
And Mr. Backen, I think, again, there might be some, I'd like to, Councilor Richter, if you wish to vote against the receipt, I'd like to dispose of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I want to vote against receipt.
Okay, so reconsideration on,
It does not need to be reconsideration, as Councillor Richter has advised she didn't understand the question. We can
Okay.
simply revote the
okay,
question.
so I'll just call the question again on receipt. Thank you for that. On E5. You don't want the report, that's fine. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. So Councillor Richter, turn your mic back on. Go ahead.
No, well, we've disposed of it now, right?
Well, it's been received by council, and you wish to discuss the report, you can certainly do that.
No, that's fine, I guess. I mean, it's clear the way this is going to go, so. But I just think that this process leaves something to be desired. I don't feel that council has had sufficient time with this budget in its current format to be sending it out for public input.
Okay, I understand. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. Just this being my my first time going through the municipal budgeting process, just a couple of clarification questions. With the suspension of annual contribution to capital in this report, just curious as to which projects that affects, and is that representative of council changing the reserve system to having bigger envelopes? And the second question kind of related to that is, when we go to the public, are they going to be shown which envelopes we are creating and what potential capital projects are coming down the line as a result of this?
I'm going to jump in here before I pass this off. I just want to clarify, Mr. Backen, to address the assumption that CTC is being removed. CTC from Universal is being reduced, not eliminated, I think, as you may have misspoke there. So it's being restructured, it's being changed, but it's not being eliminated. And so I just wanted to clarify that, Councillor Pratt, but we can get Ms. Ruff to confirm if you want to do that, and then we'll address the public input process.
No, thank you, Your Worship. The proper term would be, I guess, realigned or reduced because of the process that's underway. As was referenced then, by deferring the selection of the specific projects, although we're certainly well aware of the council's priorities, those I guess those specifics can be dealt with at a later date, and they can be dealt with in the context of the council priorities and as well any other needs the operation may actually have. As well, there is reference, I think, to retro, but I'll let Sandra deal with some of those. And as to the suspension of capital and participation of the public, really it's coming from the fact that we're looking at simplifying and streamlining some of the envelopes that exist. Those would be known, and as well we're looking at future community amenity contributions to replace and augment our capital. That means not just simply to deal with whatever's been reduced, but also to increase it. And the reason for that is a bit of the competition between some of the traditional priorities of previous councils and the priorities of this council. This council has some significant, I guess, priorities in terms of projects that are very, I think, significant for the community, and they're going to be a challenge, but certainly when finished are going to be something that's going to be very well received, that we're trying to fit within this with this process. But Sandra, as to the retro and any other comments you may have in terms of contribution to capital.
The contribution to capital shows as being suspended in this table, but it's also offset by an increased transfer to reserves on the other line of $2 million. So they essentially offset each other, and we'll use reserve envelopes to fund projects as they come forward. The provisions for any retro is to do with wage settlements that are outstanding at this time.
Yeah, so there's a challenge there also, but I also wanted to just come back to just a couple more comments to clarify this contribution to capital from Universal, I think is relabeled, restructured, still there, with an understanding that it's going to be very challenging to maintain CTC by department and still have the flexibility to approve projects. And the desire, I think, to provide some flexibility to council throughout the year, not having to decide today or the next council meeting which projects will be funded. Projects could potentially be funded throughout the council calendar and initiated throughout the council calendar. So it provides a lot of flexibility. There'd be no need, for example, to try to get every item outlined within the bylaw either today or April 3rd. It could be done throughout the year. Councillor Pratt, you want to restate your question about public input?
No, I just as a subsequent question
Sure,
to your comments, Your Worship, then by that logic, then if we are not going kind of line by line on which projects are being funded at this time, or when this comes back to us after public input, that would mean then we're not looking to fund those projects with any potential tax increases as a result of borrowing. We're going to be finding other ways to potentially pay for it within those envelopes. Is that correct?
Mr. Backen, do you want to try to address that?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's correct as to the envelopes and the rates. What we're looking at then is to augment the difference between reserves or contributions from community amenities with potentially borrowing. But the timing and the extent of that borrowing is not yet to be fully determined because Council's only seen some of the envelopes for the capital projects. And as we work to refine those, we think will be more specific, and then we can actually drill down in terms of when that's to be occurring and what amount that should be occurring in.
Councillor Pratt, does that address your question?
It does.
CTC?
Thank you.
Could you restate your question on public input? Try to do one at a time. Can you go into public input? You had a question about what was going to the public, I believe.
I think Ms. Ruff addressed it.
Addressed that, okay.
Or Mr. Backen, that the public will be seeing the envelopes that we are proposing.
That's correct. Yeah, is that correct?
Thank you.
Mr. Backen? Yeah, that's correct. So, Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question through the chair, if I may, to staff. I think we began this process quite earlier than other years than I can remember. How many presentations can you remember that we've had to council, and how many reports have we had? It seems to me there's quite a few we've had, if I may, through the chair.
We've had 3 presentations, and then there's been additional questions answered.
I believe there's been multiple memos in our distribution as well.
Yeah, I understand. We've had quite a bit of discussion on the budget, and I know that nobody wants to increase taxes, and it looks like looking at our surrounding communities of Surrey, of course, Burnaby, Vancouver, Richmond, many of them, including Langley City, many of them are going to be looking at higher tax increases than ourselves. I know that it's a burden on all folks, but certainly the Township of Langley is doing everything we can to keep taxes down. I think that should be known and clear. If we need to reduce other services, that would be up to council members to say what they want or don't want. For example, I know other members of council would know more about these than myself. Things like fire protection, firefighter, fire halls. That's one example. Police services, bylaws, and other things. The Township of Langley is a growing community, recreational services. So, somebody has to pay for those down the road, but it's important that we're prudent with our budget and how we proceed accordingly. So thank you, the staff. We've had a lot of time. I have asked a lot of questions on the budget. I have sat down with staff. I've sat down with administration. I've asked questions, and I'm sure there's more questions to come, and I hope the public will have many questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Well, I guess where I'm having some difficulty is, and I have a printout here of a item that was released on September 20th from the contract with Langley that said, we will not raise property taxes to get our capital plan done because there is no need to. Well, 4.92 is not raising property taxes.
So, Councilor Richter, if you, maybe that would be a discussion better left for social media?
Okay.
All right, great, thank you. Seeing no other discussion, we can move on to F1, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100248, development permit application number 101190 for 289 apartment units and 20,914 square feet of ground floor commercial space. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Just a question of clarification. Why is a plan or two plan amendments needed here for this one?
I think that's a great question. Mr. Richardson, can you just confirm that for council, please?
Thank you, through your worship. The site is split designated. Mixed use, the Latimer plan on the westerly portion and apartment mixed use on the easterly portion. To provide for consistency across the plan and the density proposed, there's a Latimer plan amendment required.
I just want to confirm that too, Mr. Richardson. I didn't quite grasp it from the report, and it's only for first and second. I was going to follow up leading up to the public hearing. The scope of the density increase for this, could you outline that for us? Over and above the designations within the community plan, or the neighborhood plan, sorry.
There's two different densities involved in terms of the Latimer plan. The mixed use designation speaks to a density up to 3 floor space ratio, and the apartment mixed use speaks to a density of up to 2.5 floor space ratio and a UPA of 60. The mixed use designation does not have a UPA density measure.
Yes.
So going with the floor space ratio definition, averaging would allow 2.75 across the site pursuant to the Willoughby plan, and the proponent here is requesting 3.1.
Okay, I'll follow up on that. Councillor Richter, do you have anything more? No. Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. Out of curiosity, in the report, it indicates that this is probably the first application that's coming to us that's subject to the new CAC bylaw, where a proponent is paying additional CACs as a result of a density increase. Can you comment on whether or not the proposed density increase was included in their application before this policy was introduced, or afterwards, if they made a quick change on the fly?
Mr. Richardson, the history?
Through your worship, the application's been in process for I think longer than the latest CAC update.
Okay, so they were applying for the extra story before the CAC policy came in place.
Through your worship, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had one question. I don't see no other discussion. Is this a 6-story building or a 7-story building?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. As noted, I guess in the package there, the building presents itself adjacent to 80th Avenue as 6 stories. The site slopes downwards towards the north and then presents a 7-story form. In conversation with the project's architect as well as our building official staff, technically that meets the definition of a 7-story building. Noting from talking to staff, for firefighting purposes as well as building code purposes, the 7-story is used. Then it becomes a question, I think, of building construction. Understanding from staff that the highest in terms of a combustible construction is 6 stories, whether that's 1 or 2 stories of concrete and then wood frame above that. So it would be at the building permit stage that we would be seeking further clarification from the proponent in terms of that construction methodology or alternate methods.
So it could be either a 7-story building or a 6-story building, depending on your interpretation?
Your Worship, the current interpretation is it's 7 stories from staff and the architect.
And that would be based on BC Building Code?
Correct.
That's all right. Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on F1. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for first, second, and third reading. Rezoning application number 100693, bylaw number 5851 for a 5-story office building. Is there a motion, please? Someone's moved by, don't wave your hand if you're moving it. Moved by Councillor Van Popta. Is there a second or seconded by Councillor Kunst? Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question. I know that this is not going to go for public input because it's not requiring a plan amendment. But I did have a question with regards to the information on page 3 around sepia, so the streamside protection and enhancement area. Did we get any input from stewardship groups on this? Because as I recall, the stewardship groups in this area are quite active, and they keep an eye, and they're very proud of their achievements in terms of getting salmon back into the streams that are there.
Mr.
So
Richardson?
if we didn't get any input from stewardship groups, can we amend this to ask that stewardship groups give input prior to final?
Mr. Richardson, do you know the process? I believe that there isn't any concern from staff on SPIA, is there?
Thank you, Worship. As noted on page 3, the application complies with the township's current Schedule 3 streamside protection enhancement areas. There's a flex provision in there. As noted in the third bullet, in terms of providing for some flexibility at the outer edges of those areas. So there's a 646 square foot proposed flexing of the area offset by 646 square feet in another location plus 2,756 square feet of other enhancements. So the bylaw does provide for that flexibility. If that wasn't the case, staff would be then, or the proponent would have to apply for a streamside permit, which is not required in this case because it complies with the provisions of the bylaw.
Okay, but I guess the question that I'm asking is that the stewardship group in that community is very active and know those streams inside out. I'm just wondering if they've had a chance to comment on the acceptability of this paragraph on page 3.
Well, presumably, if they're very active, they would be following agendas, and I didn't receive any correspondence on this item. Mr.
Okay,
Richardson,
so-
can you confirm if we've received any correspondence on this item that would speak to this issue?
No correspondence received, Your Worship. And as that it complies with those requirements, there's no specific referral process.
I think do you wish to make that amendment, Councilor Richter?
I'd like to make an amendment that we ask the local stewardship groups to comment on the SPIA changes in page 3 prior to final.
Is there a seconder to that? I'm not seeing a seconder, Councilor Richter. Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on G1. That carries with Councilor Richter opposed. And move on to G2, rezoning application number 100611. This is for a 24 apartment units and 46 townhouse units on 72nd Avenue. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilor Van Popta, seconded by Councilor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on G2? Seeing none, I'll call the question on G2. Councilor Kuntz, do you need more time or? Okay, great. That carries with Councilor Richter opposed. Moving on to H1, bylaws for consideration at third reading. Official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100209. Bylaw number 5706, 5707, and 5708 for the rezoning of 36 acres of land located on the north side of 56th Avenue between 264th and 268th Streets for future industrial development. Is there a mover? Moved by Councilor Ferguson, seconded by Councilor Kuntz. Councilor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And perhaps either yourself or staff can confirm the difference between the proposed community amenity contribution in this rendition of the application versus the initial application.
Mr. Richardson?
Thank you, Worship. Just checking the notes here. Given the passage of time, the best probably equivalent comparison is previously on March the 22nd of 2022, there was a 1.9 million cash contribution. And now that cash contribution is 18.85, Your Worship.
Councillor Pratt, do you have any questions to follow that?
No, I just I'm pleased to see that the proponent worked with staff and council and yourself, Mayor, to get a bit more of an equitable contribution, in my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, more than a bit more, I would say. Councillor Van Popte, go ahead.
Yeah, so even before I went into the campaign, I had spoken at the public hearing on this and was quite displeased with development not paying for development and not getting a fair deal when the cost of farmland was so great. So I'm really happy to see this. Really thankful to both mayor and staff and the proponent on working together to come up with a fair deal. That's something that we campaigned on, is a fair deal from development, and I think this would be a good example of receiving that. So thanks for your hard work.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to comment on what both Councillor Pratt and Councillor Van Popte said, that I take the fact that I did not support this initially in March 2022, and I am very happy to see the work you have done, Mr. Mayor, and the staff and the proponent coming forward for a win-win-win for Langley. And it's sure an example of how things can work together. There's give and take on both sides, and it is much appreciated by all the parties involved that they realize that as we grow as a community, our demands grow and the cost for all of us increases. That's costs of property, that's costs of developing recreational things and fire, and the list goes on. So I can't thank the number of parties, both the proponent, yourself, and staff. It's certainly an excellent step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I did support this, and I'm glad to see that that ConWest is here, and I do appreciate their patience. It's a lot of money, and I know that our community is going to, we're grateful. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I believe the reason that we got that is because we did vote to get it into industrial. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have an amendment, and then I'm going to speak to the main motion as amended or unamended. I want to direct council's attention to page 12, item KI, which stipulates, I'll read K, compliance with the CAC policy, comprising a total voluntary community amenity contribution of $22,350,620, up from 1.9, in support of the proposed OCP amendment and rezoning, comprised of $18,850,620 as cash contribution, instead of providing an actual amenity, and still securing ownership of the 6.33 acres for the Township of Langley, for all of the improvements and streetside improvement works that are going to occur there. So the 22 million includes the 6.33 acres. Now, Mr. Backen, I want to confirm that you see no concern here, but I would like to make an amendment to KI such that it'll read $18,850,620 as a cash contribution instead of providing an actual amenity, with 100% contributed and deposited directly into the Community Amenity Contribution Fund. So move. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Now, before we take any discussion, Mr. Backen, do you see any concern with that? That is an element of the CAC policy, but given that this is an extraordinary contribution, I think it's appropriate to have it contributed directly to that Community Amenity Contribution Fund as a portion or component of the CAC policy. Do you see any concerns?
No concerns.
No concerns. So I think that's great. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the, open up the secondary queue. Okay, call the question on that amendment. H1. That carries unanimously. So as amended, I want to thank very much the two property owners and proponents that worked with our staff over a series of a few months to, I believe, come up with a fair compromise where the residents and taxpayers and the businesses in the Township of Langley proportionately benefit as well from development. We campaigned very heavily on what we called a fair deal from development, and I believe this is a step in that direction. And you can't do that alone, and I appreciate the proponents very, very much for working with township staff and just a little bit with myself to volunteer these contributions. And this is going to go a long way to moving forward with proceeding with a capital plan that we need as a community, and finding ways to pay for it that isn't property taxes, but from growth, paying and contributing for growth. So again, I want to thank everybody that participated in this, and it turns out, as I've said, all we had to do was ask. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, no, and I'm happy that a greater amenity contribution was obtained, but bottom line, it's still 36 acres of ag land that we're losing in the township.
It certainly is. It's not an easy decision. Any other discussion on H1? Seeing none, I'll call the question on H1 as amended. And that carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Moving on now to I1, General Local Government Election Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw number 5846 for final adoption. Is there a motion? Moved by Councillor Martins. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I1? Councillor Richter.
To go back to, and I think I raised it when this came through originally, the address of candidates. I don't think they should be redacted, but will at least the community that they live in be shown?
Yes, the intention is to have only online where we redact the address and show the community. The actual physical papers that are here, should someone wish to come in and view them, will still be there, as well as that is the information that is sent to Elections BC.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on I1? Seeing none, I'll call the question. That carries unanimously. Moving on to I2, credit card payment service fee, bylaw number 5853. A motion, please. Moved by Councillor Martins. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Discussion. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering through you to staff, if staff have any idea how much additional monies this will generate in the course of a year, and who the money is mainly going to come from. Is it going to come from taxpayers who are paying their property taxes with credit cards, or is it going to come from applicants that are trying to get proposals through?
Mr. Bracken?
Your Worship, it's a bit difficult to tell. We see this as being an added service to the community. This allows them to actually place any of those items that were referenced on their taxes. To do so, though, there would be a supplemental charge that would be equal to the amount that the credit card company would charge the township for the use of a credit card. So if that was, say, $100 and a 2.5% credit card fee, the charge to the resident would be $102.50, and then it would be a net of $100 to the township. So it should not affect our net. At this point, though, we don't really have any numbers in terms of what volume will be processed that way, but we think it is something that many people would like to at least consider.
Yeah. No, and I think we should try it. I just hope that we track it. Maybe we could find out if it's primarily residents having to pay their property taxes on a credit card. That, to me, is a signal that times are not good out there.
Okay, thank you. Going to call the question on I2. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to I3, Langley Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw number 5852. Get a motion? Moved by Councillor Van Popta. Is there a seconder to the final adoption here? Councillor Bailey, second. Is there any discussion on I3? Seeing none, call the question. That carries unanimously. Moving on to I4, final adoption for rezoning application number 100685, bylaw number 5808, moved by Councillor Ferguson. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Pop. Is any discussion on I4? Seeing none. Oh, there's quite there. Okay. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this application based on where it is in the process, but I think everybody's going to know what I'm going to say. I hope this is one of the last applications we see with front-loaded single family here in the township, even in Maryville.
Yeah, so I'm gonna concur with that. I think it's pretty late in the process. So I'm gonna call the question on I-4. That carries unanimously. I'm gonna move on to correspondence J1. Get a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Martins, seconded by Councillor Kuntz. Is gonna call the question on receipt. It carries unanimously. So, I don't think we need any sort of assistance with staff here. So I think that may be appropriate to get a motion to Mr. Bracken fund it this year from council contingency and have them go into the tax exemption policy program next year. So is there a motion to fund this from council contingency? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? Councillor Kuntz, this would be on funding this for this year from council contingency.
Okay, so that's going to happen this year then?
It would happen
for them?
this year,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other discussion on J1? Seeing none. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to J2. Get a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Kuntz. To call the question on receipt. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to K1. I get a motion, please, to receive that.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kuntz. To call the question on K1. Carries unanimously. Move on to K2. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion on the work plan? Seeing none. J2. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on here to Mayor and Council report. I did say last time I'd give a mayor's report, but I'm actually going to wait for the quarter to finish, and then I'll do that on April 3rd. I'm going to do it once a quarter. I decided I'll do it at the end of the quarter, not in the middle of the quarter. Is there any other member of council who would like to make a report? Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Bailey and I attended the housing forum put on by the local Langley Immigrant Society. And I guess I wanted to just highlight the need for affordable housing. There was a story that somebody shared about a young man that came here from Ethiopia. He's a tradesman, he has a job, maybe it's not paying the best, but right now he's living in the Gateway of Hope. And it just struck me as, we have the ability on this council to make decisions about housing, and I just really wanted to just highlight that there are people in our community that are, again, really, really struggling. And he won the lottery to come to Canada, and he's unfortunately can't find an affordable place to live. So again, we need to make sure that we're supporting affordable housing as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I had attended that meeting with Councillor Kuntz, and I also sit on the Immigration Committee, and I really want to stress the fact that there's enough pressures on seniors and youth and that, and now we've got a very large immigrant influx in here. So, affordable housing is going to come under a competition. So we have to really make sure that we pay attention to it. Also, I had the pleasure of attending the Fraser Valley Cultural Diversity Awards the other night, and it was a real eye-opener. There was one woman there who came forward who received an award about 5 years ago. She had to temporarily farm her 2 kids out to her sister, and then was literally eating out of the garbage receptacle behind Kentucky Fried Chicken. And now this lady is feeding over 1,000 people, and it's just an incredible example of how people, when they get a chance, can contribute back immediately. It was a real honor to be there.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, a couple of events that I went to. One was participating in the coldest night of the year walk through the Gateway of Hope. And along the line of housing, just recognition that there's so many people out there. And it really was the coldest night of the year. It started snowing. I had the honor of walking with Councillor Pratt and seeing people out there on the street living there. So that was one. And then the other event that I attended was the International Women's Day event hosted by Ishtar Transition Society, and hearing the stories, the courage of some people, the trauma they've been through, and overcoming that and giving back to their community. It was a very humbling experience, and I was honored to be there just to, on behalf of council here. So,
Thank you. No other reports. Move on to M, Metro Vancouver Regional Committee reports. Anybody wish to make a report? Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you. And I have two committees coming up this week, liquid waste and solid waste, and we'll be discussing the items regarding sewage treatment plant, liquid waste plants, and also issues regarding solid waste. I did also, last term, I used to say public announcements and educational items. The oceans will be happy if folks, all of us that wash our clothes, wash in cold water, because the fibers in hot water contribute to pollution in the oceans, and the fish will be happy, and the whales and all the other creatures that live in the ocean if you wash in cold water. So that's my public announcement for today from the Liquid Waste Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Martins, go ahead.
yeah, thank you. So I attended two committee meetings this past week, one with the regional parks and the other one with the George Massey Tunnel, our George Massey Crossing Task Force. And I just wanted to mention for some of the history buffs in the crowd, the George Massey, the first tunnel, the grand opening was in 1959, and the parade, the car parade, was led by a horse-drawn carriage. That same carriage is what's used by the BC Farm Museum in Fort Langley, the covered carriage that you probably have seen in some of the events and parades. It's the exact same one. I have provided that history information on behalf of Langley to Metro, and to consider using that, because it'll be about 70 years later, and it would be great to see that same wagon leading the parade again through the grand opening. So I just wanted to let you all know that we do have a piece of pretty incredible history sitting here in Langley.
Pretty cool. Seeing no other reports, rather than why don't we, eating up to 2 hours here, why don't we call a brief recess and come back at 3:20. Carry on. get back underway here. Move on to N1, items from prior meetings, tree protection bylaw update 2023. Ms. Bauer, for councils, just to make sure everybody's clear, this is already back on the floor.
Yes, as allowed under the community charter, the mayor can place something back on the floor.
So do we need it moved and seconded?
Yes, it
yes,
goes
we
back.
do.
It goes back to the beginning of
Back to the beginning. So just want to clarify, everybody's clear of the process. Is there a mover? Final adoption of the tree protection bylaw update. Yeah, moved by Councillor Kunst, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. So I'm going to go straight to Councillor Van Popta. I believe you're at the head of the line anyway regarding redoing that amendment. I believe. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So we're back here because of me, rookie error. I failed to understand fully the 2-to-1 ratio implication as it came to the fees. So we've just done a little bit of rework here.
So you're moving an amendment.
I'm moving an amendment
as distributed to council.
As distributed to council and to.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So this is just more of an administration just to see that this is applied properly. In my zealousness to save trees, especially within the Brookswood area, I just. In a rush, didn't fully understand the 2-to-1 ratio, which I do now, and I apologize for having this come back, but I'm pretty confident with staff's help on this that we've actually come up with a really good fee structure now.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that appreciate that process, and you don't need to go into too much further. I really appreciate you bringing this back and working with staff to clarify some unintended consequences, how I'd phrase it, all with good intentions. So is there any more discussion on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. That carries unanimously. So now back to the main motion. Do you have anything more on the main motion, Councilor Brampopta? No. So seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on N1 as amended. That carries unanimously. So moving on to N2. Ms. Bauer, I'm going to have you to differentiate and outline the difference with this one.
In this instance, the bylaw has been adopted the resolution was made more than a month ago, so.
No, this one is N2. I believe this one is from 2019.
Oh,
so
it's even further.
It requires a motion without debate, I understand. Just want to clarify that everybody's clear on the process.
We're clear on the process. As it is loaded in that, the mayor cannot bring it back without reconsideration, so what we're going to do is first have a vote on reconsideration only. That comes with no debate. And then if reconsideration passes, we put the motion back on the table as it was originally adopted.
Right. So then I do not need a mover and seconder in that case, or do I?
Yes, you actually do need a motion.
Yes, that's what you need to be removed and reseconded, so everybody's clear on the process should reconsideration go through. So I'm going to call the question on reconsideration of N2.
I'm sorry, you do need a seconder.
Is there a seconder to reconsideration? Thank you, Councillor Richter. Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Councillor Richter. That carries unanimously. Thank you for that. So N2 is back on the floor. Is there a mover? I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. So I have, Councillor Richter, I'll let you go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I was just wondering why we're bringing this back.
So I'll speak to it when we get there. Do you have any questions or other comments?
No, I just wanted to know why it's coming back.
Mayor Van Popta and Mayor Van Popta. Is there something I can help with?
No, I'm just waiting for this conversation to conclude.
Okay.
Mr. Bracken, perhaps this could carry on at another time. So I'm going to carry on. So N2, I brought back integrated stormwater management plan. This was brought to council, moved by Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson back in 2019 on March 11th. The council directs staff to proceed with an integrated stormwater management plan for West Creek. with a focus on the Gloucester industrial lands, utilizing funding currently available in the Stormwater Capital Reserve account up to a maximum of $250,000 with cost recovery from development within the area. And further, that this integrated stormwater management plan be commenced in 2019. So with completion in 2020. So Mr. Backen, do we need to mend away the timeline? The other option, I believe, is council has a referral motion that I think we worked on a little bit. I think that would be appropriate and the timeline would not apply under that referral. Is that correct? That's correct. So really focusing on the first paragraph for council. And back in 2019, this was brought forward in regards to some desire from some to see an expansion of industrial land development inside the Gloucester industrial estates, inside the traditional boundaries, which include, has been identified back at the time and still today as a pretty sensitive area, deserving of some additional consideration. I voted in favor of this back in 2019, and it was defeated by a 5-4 vote. So I brought this back under a new council with a desire to see this completed prior to and ongoing with consideration of additional development within the Gloucester Industrial Estates, which is almost finished except for some additional lands adjacent to some watershed items. So that's what this is back for. I'd like to give this council a chance to do what I thought should have been done along with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, and Councillor Davis back in 2019. And if it had been approved at that time, it would have been finished already. So I think no time like the present to give this council a chance to have a close, long look at a proper stormwater management plan for this portion of the West Creek watershed. With that, I'd also like to then point to council's refer it to staff for review of whether the costs have changed, the timeline, potential rationale, potentially additional SPIA requirements for this sensitive area. So I'll move that referral as in the package. Is there a seconder to that referral? Seconded by Councillor Richter. So I think the referral speaks for itself. This will be for a staff report to get an update in the last 3 years on potential costs, timelines, funding sources, and a potential change to the scope to review this area, I think, prior to seeing some really significant potential rezoning applications in the area. I'm going to, on the referral, go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you. As indicated in the report and then on the agenda that I had actually opposed this initially, and things have changed significantly since the particular motion was put on the table. But I do have a couple of quick questions, if I may, through the chair. What is the difference between an integrated stormwater management plan and a stormwater management plan, if I may, through the chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Just giving some reflection here. The integrated storm management plan likely speaks on a larger catchment area that integrates the different components as far as the development applications, stormwater infrastructure systems, and how they can, I guess, coexist with the natural habitat that's going on. But perhaps I need some more clarity on the exact changes or clarifications you're looking for.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, well, I did want to say, so if someone was to hire their engineer and put together a stormwater management plan, SMP, would that be acceptable to staff or those powers that be as an ISMP as well, if I may?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Perhaps what Councillor Ferguson is referring to, and please clarify if not, is as far as if it's based on a local level with respect to a development application versus the integrated, which is a watershed wide. There's different scopes of works related to either analysis.
Okay, and my last question is basically all of these come under provincial review. Is that a water management survey, MS, or another name for it, if I may, through the chair?
Perhaps the councillor is referring to the Water Sustainability Act as far as working around the water course.
Okay, so that takes time for any applicant to get the provincial designations and report. I understand that there might be indeed a backlog at provincial level regarding getting those particular reports done, if I may.
Thank you, through your worship. Although not privy to any backlog or resource challenges at the ministry and federal levels, we have been seeing applications taking up to 18 months to 2 years to be able to process and approvals.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, again, going back into the history of this, when Gloucester was first created, it was just a shade too small for an integrated stormwater management plan. And so one was never done. And the DFO put some regulations in which we've had problems with because they expired and they were re-extended, but they've expired again now. The issue is that the area does need an integrated stormwater management plan. And now that these additional 36 acres have been put in, it now has topped that crest, which would make it an important and mandatory thing to have an ISMP in place.
Great, thank you. I just want to confirm before then there's no other speakers. Mr. Richardson, just confirm, even with the addition of the other lands now going to Metro Vancouver, this would still be, Gloucester would still be under the threshold. Is that correct?
Your worship, as I understand it, yes.
That's correct, yeah.
But
Okay.
the report would provide more information on
That's
that.
correct. I believe the report could
Your
fill that in. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question through yourself to staff, or perhaps you're able to answer it yourself. With this process, if we decide when the report comes back to proceed with an ISMP, what does that mean for any potential applications? Does this preclude them from coming forward, or are they able to come forward as this is being completed?
Mr. Richardson?
Thank you, worship. That would be council's prerogative pending the outcomes of the report. And there'd be the report would outline the scope, parameters, items to be included, and some of those timing considerations, your worship.
All right, thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Okay, thank you. I don't think it'd be supported by the majority of council, but I'd be interested to see, something put in place where we don't see any applications in Gloucester until this is completed, just so that we can avoid any potential controversy.
You could certainly bring that forward as a notice of motion, or you could also make that as a referral motion if any applications do come forward.
Yep, absolutely.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. So I'm going to call the question on the referral of N2. That carries unanimously. Move on to, I'm going to move reconsideration. This item N3, is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta, and call the question on reconsideration. That carries unanimously. So we need another mover and seconder, I believe, Councillor, sorry, not a councillor, sorry, the Madam Clerk. So I get a mover and a seconder to the original bylaw, please. Get a mover?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to sit back down, please. No, you cannot. The delegation is concluded. I need you to sit back down, please. You're not making a comment. Please sit down. Thank you.
Your worship.
Yes.
Your worship, just to clarify, I think for the record, I need to specify this was not brought back by the mayor within 30 days. This was brought back by motion of council, which under procedural bylaw is unlimited. I think we need to make that clear.
That's correct.
The second aspect of it as well is that the clerk's note becomes very important in this proceeding then. If council is going to proceed, I would just bring out the clerk's note.
So I think we've got an alternative here. So I'm going to, and there's no need to maybe debate the main motion. I'm going to make a referral motion to revisit this at the conclusion of a Glenwood neighborhood plan. Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on the referral? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that a referral is very fair to the residents that have worked on this in very good faith for a long period of time. I believe that they started this whole process back in 2017, and they got it all the way up to final. And referring it to whenever Glenwood's done, I just don't think that's fair to them. I'm sorry, I can't support that referral.
No, I understand. Councillor Kunst? Councillor
Yeah,
Kunst,
I can't
please
support it.
refrain from commenting, please. Trying to conduct a council meeting. Please go ahead, Councillor Kunst.
I can't support it either. I still don't know why they're not getting their reconsideration, and I was hoping that maybe, we could have rethought that and just, allowed this process to happen. I've lived in Brookswood my whole life. Brookswood's tired. There's some areas that really need, and Glenwood's not going to have those plans for a long time. People are, needing sewer or septic, or they're on septic and it's going to cost them a lot of money to repair that, I'm, just not going to be supporting that either.
I understand. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I know one thing that you attempted to do last term was to phase the neighborhood community plans in Brookswood as they came in.
Yes.
So we would avoid the situation where we have three concurring at the same time.
I did, yeah.
And just as a question, if the main concern or if the significant concern is by allowing something like this to proceed, that we would open up Glenwood to preemptive development before any neighborhood plan is complete, could we, is there a mechanism to approve a local area service so that people who are just wanting to replace their septic with city services that they'll be paying for, combine that with some covenant that no subdivision applications, rezoning, development permits, et cetera, are allowed to proceed for these properties until a Glenwood plan is finalized?
Mr. Richardson, is that a possibility?
Your Worship, that is a possibility.
Yeah, so I think that Councillor Pratt, I'd reiterate that that's been attempted in the past and hasn't been honored, so I'll just leave it at that.
Attempted as in council has passed a motion
I'll just leave it at that, Councillor Pratt. I can't provide any more details.
Okay. Well, if this referral fails, I would move in a motion to achieve that.
So I'm sorry, we're having a council meeting. If you could please refrain from interrupting the proceedings, please. Please, I'm not a dictator. We're carrying on a council meeting. You're actually interrupting and disrupting the council meeting. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I did want to say that in our agenda, before this motion amendment was put in, was to say no. And council is now debating moving it forward to another situation, which could be sooner than later. I'll remind my colleagues that we waited 4 years last term and didn't get the Brookswood Fernbridge plan done. And I take responsibility for that. That's my fault. Because I sat here and I asked council, where is the Brookswood Fernbridge community plan? And those on council of the day didn't have an answer. Now we are proceeding, I guess, with our official community plans. We hope to have it done sooner than later. So this particular amendment gives us an opportunity to put it forward and not say no to it, but give them the opportunity. Now, this leads to a question that I'm going to ask, if I may, through the chair. Mr. Backen or somebody might be able to answer it, or some who have been on staff a while. When we were doing High Point, did we not ask those proponents of High Point to put a larger pipe size in so that we could, so that they could get a latecomer back from those people that wanted to add on in the future, if I may, through the chair? Through the chair,
yeah,
too.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Backen.
Effectively correct, Councillor. The slight distinction was the system was sized with the use of some pump stations and some pressurization. So it's a bit more complex than just a big pipe. There's some other elements to it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note that when you're designing a community in the future, you have the right pipe sizes, because in the future, we're going to need those pipe sizes.
That's exactly correct, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification here. So the motion that's on the table that we're discussing is to refer this, is it the reconsideration to the end of the Glenwood neighborhood plan?
Final adoption of this bylaw would be deferred until the conclusion of the Glenwood neighborhood plan, if this is successful.
Final adoption deferred. So Councillor Pratt's amendment would be in contradiction to this deferral motion.
He hasn't moved an amendment, Councillor Richter.
Okay, but I actually like his motion and I was going to second it. But what I'm asking is, can we put an amendment in on this one or not?
I'll double check if Councillor Pratt wishes to move that amendment, or someone else wants to move an amendment. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fully cognizant of why the apprehension is there to put in pipes preemptively. Fully understand that, but I do believe that we had a process in place that would allow residents to pursue this process, open to all residents. And I think based on just the fact that in a good way, we're in a new direction of planning where I think even though we're going to have the 3 NCPs coming forward at once, I think we're going to do a better job of phasing and rationalizing development in Brookswood so that we don't make the same mistakes as other neighborhoods. And so for that reason, I would assume that the Glenwood Neighborhood Community Plan is probably going to be approved later rather than sooner, and would result in these residents being unfairly targeted, in my opinion, and not being able to put this sewage in place. So I would make that amendment to put in a covenant that no applications for subdivision, rezoning, or development would be permitted for the properties subject to this local area service until such a time that the Glenwood Neighborhood Plan is complete.
Yeah, so I'm gonna rule it out of order based on the fact that you can't amend a referral to add a condition to a bylaw. So if the referral is unsuccessful, then I'd certainly take that amendment.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna rule that out of order. Is there any other discussion on? This would be the third time you've spoken to the main motion, Councillor Richter.
Yes, and I know you like to count when I talk.
It's actually the software that counts.
Yeah, okay. But I am actually wondering why we couldn't exempt this particular area, as Councillor Pratt has suggested. Would it be in contradiction to the motion? Because I just wrote down final adoption deferred to the end of the Glenwood Neighborhood Plan. So could I have a clarification
I've already
from
clarified
staff?
and ruled, Councillor Richter.
I'd like a staff clarification.
I've already clarified and ruled, Councillor Richter. Do you have anything else, Councillor Richter?
No, I guess I don't.
Great, so I'll call the question on the referral.
Opposed.
So Councillor Impopta? Yep. So that carries with Councillor Kuntz, Councillor Richter, and Councillor Pratt opposed. And moving on to P1. Can I make a motion, please? I'll make a motion to have the council calendar amended. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. I'm going to clear the queue. Go ahead, Councillor Kuntz. Hit your button again, please. Hit your button again. You want to speak to P1? Or not? Okay. Is there any discussion on P1? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why we're moving it up. Is there a conflict on the 15th?
I have a scheduling conflict. Yes, that's correct. So I'm requesting council to reschedule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on P1? Seeing none, I'll call the question on P1. That carries unanimously. And move on to P2. I'm going to move it, but there's a couple of errors I'd like to highlight for the clerk. In whereas item number 1, it should read Part 9, not Part 3. And in Clause A, it should also read Part 9, not Part 3. So council make that. So I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martins. I'm going to speak to this. This one here, therefore be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to report to council on additional resources, potential process improvements, and bylaw amendments that may be appropriate to consider that will achieve, subject to some conditions, that residential building permits, construction for renovations, additions, and other items, single-family homes, start a process and a plan to have those issued within 2 weeks. Complete the acceptance of servicing agreements for new developments and subdivisions, the process that could potentially lead to those being executed within 60 days, and issue all other types of building permits, such as multifamily apartment buildings and commercial, with a target of 60 to 90 days. With a review of resources, processes, and other improvements to achieve this goal. This is pretty important. We see significant amounts of challenges in our community and the issues around processes and building permits taking what I seem to be too long, and seeing this our job to work with our staff to get those timelines down for the benefit of many, many people. I've heard so many stories over the last few years of people trying to build a home and waiting up to 14 months for a permit, based upon the processes that we have in place and the policies that are in place, and maybe a lack of resources. And I think this is leading down a path to working with the staff to resource and change processes and give direction that this is a high priority item for us to resolve for the benefit of the community, property owners, building housing, and increasing housing supply, and doing our part in the township in that regard. Servicing agreements, building permits, and people have to renovate and add to their home, get those permits in a very timely fashion if they're complete and ready to go. Any other discussion on P2? Seeing none, call the question on P2. That carries unanimously. So we're moving on to P4, sorry, P3, sorry, yeah, P3, I'm skipping, going ahead too quickly here. P3, I'm going to move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martins. I think this one speaks for itself. This is in regards to some work plan issues where I've done a bit more research on this and had some consultation with management in regards to we have existing policies in place to address this, and I believe that they're accommodated, and this won't happen again. I think Council's made that very clear, but the policies already are in place, and this one went a bit too far. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we would not proceed with having a parks and playing fields development policy.
Mr. Bracken, do you, Mr. Rowland, Mr. Zwag, sorry, want to give this some context to help Councillor Richter?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Council may remember the issue that came to light at Old Yale Park in Murrayville last year. We were directed to develop a new policy with respect to any significant work that occurs in existing parks. Upon further review of all available existing policies, including existing policy 06001, it already provides for that input when it comes to developing recreational, culture, and parks facilities. So staff are of the mindset that an additional policy would be redundant and wouldn't add in much benefit, and instead we should rely on this existing policy as is.
Okay, and are we sure that the existing policy as is going to provide for enough public input on changes in parks? Because it seems to me it's kind of limited to construction of parking lots.
Mr. Bracken, I think it might be helpful for you to jump in here. I mean, we're trying to, I think, make sure that staff can make minor additions and add trails and other things without everything requiring an open house, I believe. But of course, any major parks project would go through that public input process.
Yeah, that's correct. The challenge I think we face is we had a process that was working within certain boundaries, but certainly had some deficiencies. The attempted remedy then, I think, was to try to do something that would be very prohibitive of any improvements or modifications. So we revert back to the original policy, but with a deeper understanding in terms of the necessity of the direction of council to ensure that we are getting the adequate level of public, consultation, given the nature of the work being considered.
Okay, so what would the threshold be then that would trigger additional public input?
So, Your Worship, I guess it somewhat depends upon the nature of the works. For example, putting in a new gate would probably simply be advertisement. If it was to be something, as we've learned before, it would probably be something along the lines of a public open house or consultation. In essence, you've identified the challenge. Do we require some public consultation for installation of garbage receptacles, or do we simply do it when it's something significant? And as we saw in this case, it was the trees that were being, removed for the purposes of a parking lot.
Okay, so if we get rid of this policy 023, because it's redundant.
I just want to confirm, Mr. Beck, we're not getting rid of a policy. We're just not
Proceeding with it.
We're not proceeding with the work item, Councillor Richter, but with the policy still in place. We're not repealing a policy.
Okay, but are we confident that there are enough provisions in 06001 to allow public input on things affecting parks when needed?
I believe management are, Councillor Richter, and I brought this forward for Council's consideration under the understanding that it is.
Okay.
That's correct.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear from staff, if I could, please.
As you know, Councillor Richter, all questions through the chair. If I'm able to answer it, I will. But Mr. Bracken, do you wish to confirm that what I said was correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. We think the previous policy, or the policy in place now, I guess is a better term, is adequate for our needs.
Yeah, thank you for confirming that for us. Councillor Richter, anything else?
No, thank you.
Great. Let's move on. Call the question on P3. You in favor, Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. You got to be a little quicker than that. So that carries unanimously. Let's move on to Councillor Van Popta. Go ahead, P4.
All right.
You're going to move that? You're going to move that?
Oh, do I move my own?
You just would move it, yeah?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Go ahead.
Okay.
You can read it, speak to it.
Yeah,
whatever
so
you wish.
I'm not going to read the whereas, but therefore be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to report to council with draft bylaw amendments to the Langley Building Code Bylaw 2008, number 4642, to confirm the adoption of Step 4 of the BC Energy Step Code for Part 9 residential buildings to start January 1st, 2024.
Great. You want to speak to it some more? Or
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this one's pretty important to me. As we move towards our sustainability within the Township of Langley, it's important that we start, especially as we are in a very heavy construction phase, that we're doing things to the best of our capabilities. The province introduced the Energy Step Code as part of the BC Building Code in 2017, and it was always optional for municipalities. Langley Township adopted the first steps in 2019, and there are 5 steps for Part 9 residential buildings, which encompass single-family, detached, duplex, row houses, and townhouses. There will be major revisions within 2023 to establish Step Code 3 as the baseline for all new homes within British Columbia. Moving to Step Code 4 is bumping up our timeline to be building higher efficiency homes. And I think that it's something that we will be looked upon as being leaders in the region. Outside of the Vancouvers, nobody is above, outside of the Vancouvers and Richmond, nobody is beyond Step Code 3. So with the adoption of this, moving to Step Code 4, we will be the first in our region. And that is fairly significant, and it's pushing the construction industry to be prepared, to do better, and for us to meet our targets sooner.
Great. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on P4. That carries unanimously. So we're going to obviously come back to P5, 6, and 7. Move on here to Councilor Martins. Go ahead. Turn your mic on. See, not a touchscreen. Go ahead. Go ahead, Councilor Martins.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'd like to move a motion for tattoo parlor bylaw review.
Great. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councilor Bailey. Go ahead. Would you speak to it some more?
Yeah, I'm not going to reread the motion. It speaks for itself. The spirit of this one is to allow tattoo shops in the Township of Langley to be put into suitable zoning locations and to bring the Township of Langley into this century.
Great. I think it does speak for itself. Councilor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a pressing need for this right now. And I'd like to ask staff what, in terms of the cost of doing this and the staff resources to do it, do we have sufficient resources to take this on at this time?
Mr. Richardson, Mr. Bracken.
This item can be accomplished with existing staff resources, Your Worship.
That's what I would assume, yeah. Councilor Richter?
Okay, so I'd like to ask the mover why on earth we have to get into this. It's never been an issue in the township for as long as I've been here.
Mover's not requesting to speak. Councilor Richter, do you have anything else?
No, other than to say I'm not going to support it because I think it's not needed at this time.
Okay. Councilor Bailey?
I have to hesitate.
I think you should.
This is not bringing this policy into the 21st century. It's screaming ahead to the 20th century. There are an awful lot of people where before tattoos were looked at sailors and bikers and all the other stereotypes, and now there's a vast amount of people of all ages who are getting tattoos, and there are other things that are deemed to be tattoos. And I just think that it's about time that our residents are allowed to stay at home, and that people are allowed to have businesses, small businesses here. A lot of people, anyone who wants to get a tattoo or anything like that now has to leave their township, and it's just God, this isn't Victorian. It's pre-Victorian. This is. I was amazed when I found out that the township had this kind of attitude.
Appreciate that, Councillor Bailey. I'm going to see no other speakers.
Your worship.
Oh, Councillor Pratt, since we were here in person, it'd be much easier. Go ahead.
Hopefully this will be the last time we have to do this. Yeah, no, I appreciate Councillor Martin's bringing this forward, and part of the reason why I believe sometimes we don't see a demand for things like this or use like this is because we are preempting the disapproval of something like this. And so if you're a resident or a business owner trying to set something up, you look at our bylaws, you see automatically it's not going to happen. Well, we know how hard it is sometimes to fight a municipality to change rules. So pleased this is coming forward. One question I did have through yourself to either the mover or staff, whoever is able to answer it. I believe tattoo parlors or shops are also not permitted as a home accessory use within most residential zoning bylaws. Will this potentially remove that exclusion, or will they still be excluded from opening up in a person's home as an accessory workplace?
Mr. Richardson, will you answer that? And just, I guess, confirm the staff report can outline the scope of the amendment. But go ahead.
Through your worship, yeah, I would concur with that. That I note the staff understand the intent of the motion is to review the item, identify appropriate zoning conditions for that, and those locations where they would be most appropriately located, including, if acceptable, and accessory locations.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to obviously support this. I think I've always been clear that when we have bylaws that, maybe need some updating, that of course we can, the easiest thing we can do is just do nothing. But I think appreciate when work is done like this to suggest that we have proprietors in our community that are looking to do some version of this activity. What I've learned actually through just following this process is that not all tattooing is the same, and not all tattooing is what we think it might be. And what could fall under the scope of this bylaw. And so I really appreciate this. I think it's important to review these things from time to time. And I think the fact that tattoo parlors in quotes kind of speaks for itself, kind of speaks to the age of this. So I think this is great. I think staff can find time for this amongst all other important work items. And I think one thing that I think you were wish you had mentioned is, because you told me about it, was that we have maybe some people that are operating this type of service. We want to bring them into the light and have them properly regulated by the province. And I think I really appreciate you bringing this forward. And again, anyone can do nothing. So I'm going to call the question on P8. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'd like to move this and this community proclamations council policy. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to report to council on a potential revised proclamations process, including but not necessarily limited to a review of the proclamations process in other neighboring and regional municipalities that accommodate proclamation requests on behalf of legitimate organizations of long-standing community involvement and positive impact, with relevant policy revisions and options that may be appropriate for council to consider, and B, to look into the feasibility and cost of introducing an additional flagpole at the Township of Langley Civic Facility to be used as part of a revised proclamation consideration process, if so adopted by council. I'd like to move that.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Do you wish to speak to it some more?
Yeah, I participated, I'm an old guy, so I'd had the opportunity to participate with an awful lot of charities and nonprofits and causes. And I'll look to the most recent one that was just March 8th was International Women's Day. And there's an awful lot of causes, or whatever you want to call it, that need awareness to get out there. And by the township stepping up and making proclamations, it helps those organizations and those causes to get the word out an awful lot of people key on communications are so important, and that's exactly what this is. This is the township recognizing legitimate, long-standing, and I stress, positive initiatives such as either International Women's Day. And I'll give you an example of why I bring this forward. If you look at the city of Vancouver for MS Day, they not only make a proclamation, they light up the sails in red, they light up Town Hall in red, and they light up the BC Place Stadium in red to recognize and to bring important awareness to MS in this circumstance, which Canada unfortunately leads the world in. So I don't accept the current policy of doing nothing. Sorry, I didn't get on this council to sit on my hands and do nothing. I like to look at moving things ahead into this century, and also to help people, bring awareness to very important causes. This is only to get a report on what everyone else does, because I know some people are going to bring forward, well, what if some nut bar organization comes forward with some unreasonable request? Well, that's why it looks at the positive impact and long-standing community involvement. So, yeah, I'm pleased to bring this forward.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Well, again, going back to a historical perspective, I think this motion is a step backwards. I'm not going to support it. Previous councils, and I was on one of those councils, had a great deal of effort and thought and time and energy into putting together the practice that we now have. And that was because of a lot of different circumstances that came up, such as dueling groups, having to decide one group over another group, having to decide what is actually legitimate and a positive impact. And under the community charter, as well as our right to free speech, every group is, in their minds, a legitimate group. So how do you decide that they're not a legitimate group? And what kind of legal situation are you going to put the township into should it be challenged in a court? I think that this is going to create a lot of additional staff costs because, as I recall back at the time, an inordinate amount of staff time was used up in processing these things, in raising flags, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't think it's necessary. If you light up, and we have a crosswalk out there now that we put different lights on, a lot of people drive under it when they're lit up and they don't even know what they're lit up for. So I just think this is a backwards move, and I don't support it. I think we're going to run into a lot of definition questions down the road, and having been there, I don't want to go back there. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, through the chair, through the clerk, I guess, is council able to at any time make a motion and say, we would like something ABC Day and move it in second and vote on it with majority? Able to do that, if I may, through the chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. That analysis is correct, and I think we understand the purpose of this process, this review, to really do a report and review the intricacies. As Councillor Ferguson mentioned, the issue is not the ability of council to do that. It's really the implications of trying to stop doing that for certain organizations. And I think the request here is simply a review to determine what other organizations are doing, how they may be overcoming those obstacles given the charter rights and freedoms, and making sure there's equity and equality between the applicants. So the authority is clearly there. I think it's just to ensure that we're not obliged to do in further circumstances we may not feel comfortable with.
Just a supplemental question. The reason why I use that bad example, I'll use a better example, if I may. The Legion, we usually get a request from them to sell poppies and to acknowledge what they do. And also, we have cenotaphs and cemeteries, which we have celebrations and a remembrance. But we do that by motion. Is that not correct, Mr. McIntyre, through the chair?
That's correct. The motion is actually to support the sales or to recognize the day as opposed to an actual proclamation. There's a bit of a distinction there. And I think the key language hinges around this term proclamation and what the implications of that are under the current federal human rights legislation.
So I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, what to do with this, other than if we could send it to the council CAC committee and discuss it more.
You know, I wish we had a CAC committee, Council
Well,
Ferguson. That would be the CPC committee, I think, or the council priorities process, whatever it's called.
I'm
this
getting
term.
caught up with too much of
Council,
CAC running in my brain.
Council process
But
committee, I believe it's called.
Would that be a motion in order?
It would be a motion that's in
So
order,
I
but
would
I have a
su-
couple of other speakers. Can I
Okay,
come back
well,
to you
I'll
on
do
that?
that when the time
Come
comes.
back to you.
Thank
Councillor Pratt, go ahead. You're muted, Councillor Pratt. There we go. Start over.
Here I
please.
was
There we
thinking,
go.
oh, dang it. I didn't want to
You
be
were
the
gonna do it at
26
least
year old
once.
tech issues.
So
Yeah, I'm gonna support the motion for the reason that it's asking for review and some study on it, because I do see the possibility where if the matrix is off for making the decision of who we're letting or who we're making the proclamations for or not for, that it can get a bit dicey, especially if it's a council vote. So I definitely have those reservations, but I see absolutely no harm in having a review and a study of it. So if there's a best practice that we can follow to make sure that we're doing the right thing, fully support that.
that's great. Okay, thank you. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when Councillor Bailey talks, he's so passionate. It's really hard to not want to support his motion. But being on council now for 4 years, you see so much that comes, you know, through that people want endorsements for, or, you know, whatever. But and every day on social media, there's a special day for everyone. So I'm not really sure how we're going to accommodate all the requests. And so that's why I think the policy that we currently have is actually is a really good one. And so I won't be supporting it. I understand the reason why you want to do that, but for me, I actually really do like the policy that we currently have. So thank you.
That's great. Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that I support this and I will be voting for it. And it concerns me when we shy away from things and just unilaterally say no, rather than trying to work something through, do a review, look at this further and see if there's a way forward rather than just putting up a wall.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ferguson, you have a referral motion. Go ahead. Sorry. No, sorry, there's a software malfunction again. Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, I would like to refer this motion to the Council Priorities Committee.
Is there a seconder to that referral? Seconded by Councillor Richter.
And the only reason, my speaking to it, saying it gives us a little chance to do our own research and save staff time and energy, and then come back with some suggestions. I don't think anybody on this council wants to put up a opposition to legitimate organization. It's just the trouble is the challenge is, as the clerk has said, as the administrator said, and others have said as well, that we can get caught up with legal and constitutional questions. So it gives us a chance for some thought into it, and that was the reason. I'm not saying no to it. I'm saying it give it some more thought. Thank you.
Councillor Kuntz, did you wish to speak to the referral? Can you hit your button again, please? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Do we have a council priorities committee?
We do. Do we not,
When?
Ms. Bauer?
I thought we got rid of that.
We just haven't used it so far this term. Is that correct? Yeah, it's still there, Councillor Kuntz.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I'll support that.
Okay, thank you. So on the referral, I mean, this is for a staff report. I'm in favor of the staff report. Maybe the staff report could be referred to CPC, Councillor Ferguson.
I'm just trying to save time.
Trying to save time, yeah. But I'm good with it. If the referral happens or it doesn't happen, I won't be losing any sleep over it. I'll call the question on the referral.
Opposed to the referral.
For the referral. Just going to see that carries with Councillor. You're voting against the referral, Councillor Bailey? Just want to confirm. Yep. So it carries with Councillor Bailey Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, Councillor Pratt opposed. So I actually am going to call that again. That was obviously screwed up, so I'm going to call that again. I am opposed to the referral, obviously. So I'm going to call that again.
Opposed to the referral.
Yeah. I'm also opposed to the referral. So that referral fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, and Councillor Pratt opposed. So now back to the main motion. Any more speakers on the main motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on P9. That carries with Councillors Kunst, Richter, and Ferguson opposed. So moving on here, is there any other business before we go back to the 3 outstanding notices of motion? Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, on items distributed on March 9th, item number 16 on page 49 refers to a query that came in from a staff or from a resident. And there's a notation that a staff person will be responding via telephone. My concern about this is we've never done that this way before, and shouldn't there be a documented written response from staff to resident queries, and that the documented written response is circulated to all of council so we can see what staff have said to the person with the query?
Mr. Bracken, are you aware of the history on why it was done that way? No, not aware. Would you like to?
But we can certainly take the information and make sure there's a written response and then look at the process, Your Worship.
Okay, so I agree because I'm not quite sure as well. Hey, did you have another one?
No, that's it.
Okay, that's it. Any other business? Nope, seeing none. So I'm going to give a brief, I don't have any prepared marks or anything, but I'm going to direct council back to items P5, P6, and P7. Notices of motion filed by Councillor Van Popta. This situation in regards to conflict of interest of myself in Fort Langley is almost on the verge of being resolved. I am not in a pecuniary conflict of the first kind within the community charter on any of these motions. So voting on them would be no pecuniary it would not be a pecuniary conflict. There's been some discussion about the perception of voting on these while being a director of a nonprofit charitable organization that owns property in the vicinity. Even though it's for charitable purposes, there's no profit motive associated with it. There's a potential perception. So I've just decided to edge on the side of caution to ensure that the corporation of the Township of Langley is not subjected to any frivolous claims or other conduct on the behalf of some individuals who've shown to do that in the past. So with that, I will, Ms. Bauer, do you have the category under which I am declaring the conflict? It is not of a pecuniary kind, it is of the other kind, subject to legal advice, but not in conflict, but pursuing the right objective based on a possible perception of such. Is that correct? Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Acting Mayor Kunst to conduct the remainder of the meeting and those 3 notices of motion. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Acting Mayor Kunst here. So we will just start with, I believe it's P4. Oh, no, we did that one already. Okay. P6, improvements to Fort Langley Community Park.
P5.
Oh, sorry. Boy, I have my glasses. I need new ones. P5, improvements to Fort Langley Community Park. Would you like to move?
I would like to move.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Anyone second? Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, speakers. Okay, so I'm just going to do, I don't know how to do the button thing. Okay, I'll give it a try. Councillor Richter?
No, I get to speak to my own motion.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Of course you do.
I get to, so I will, I'm not going to read the motion part or the whereas part, but I will read the therefores. So in relations to improvements at the Fort Langley Community Park, therefore, be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to report to council with the design concept for park and amenity improvements to Fort Langley Community Park, potentially including, but not necessarily limited to, an adventure / parkour park and other needed upgrades to the Langley Fine Arts School playing field, such as new fencing or other options that may be appropriate for council to consider, excluding replacement of outdoor aquatic facilities. And then I'll speak to this. So this process was started by the previous council, and it was it's kind of just died over the campaign period. And so the purpose of this is just to resurrect this project. We got lots of fantastic input from the community on the park when the pool was removed and the splash park was put in. So this is just picking it back up and moving ahead with a couple different concepts.
Okay, do we have any other discussion? Councillor Richter?
Yeah. I'm thinking, and Fort Langley, of course, is a very unique community. All our communities are, but Fort Langley is very passionate about what happens in Fort Langley. So I'm thinking that we should maybe be making allowances for some public input prior to actually just going ahead and doing it. Things may have changed in the period of time since we had the last public input. And I see actually the three motions that are coming. So this one, number 6 and number 7, are all related and should be having some public input during. So, Madam Mayor, I don't know, I can put a motion to refer them back to staff for some ideas on public consultation. Maybe the three of them could be done together at once, and that would save some staff time.
Okay,
or I can wait and put that on.
I do have one more speaker, and then maybe we can get back to your.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through the chair. I wanted to ask a quick question where the process began, and I guess was if I may, through the chair, was it not completed, the Fort Langley outdoor pool and what I guess with spray park or whatever else that got put there and some landscaping? That's the first question. The second one is, I'll do it quickly, is the Langley Fine Arts School playing field. Is that under the jurisdiction of another body, a school district, if I may?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. So beginning with the second question first, the field, I believe, is actually on the school district property. So it's under the jurisdiction of the school district, and we do have some licenses to use them and some cross return for maintenance, but we'd have to check into the detail on that. And I'm sorry, your first question was?
Did we not complete
thank you.
Report on the Fort Langley recreational spray park or whatever it was?
Yeah, I think what's being referenced is the work on the spray park that was previously authorized has been completed, which was basically the removal of the previous infrastructure and placement with the spray park. But through that process, there were some council resolutions that were outstanding to consider further, I guess, improvements to the park itself. And I think this provides additional direction that those considerations should continue. However, it should be limited to not include outdoor aquatic activities, at least not at that location.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, so part of the previous council's directives was to go to the youth of Fort Langley and ask them specifically about what kind of amenity upgrades would happen at the fort, at the city park there. We have done this process already. The narrative out there is let's just get on with it. Let's start actually putting actions to our words, and the information's there. There's already reports on and some fantastic staff presentations on what came out of the youth report and what amenities they're looking for. So now it's just about putting that action or that plan into action.
Okay, thank you. Looks like Councillor Pratt also has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Acting Mayor Kunst, and through yourself to staff. If this passes and a proposed or a set of proposals for the park come back to council, would those not be subject to public engagement at that time? So the public actually has something tangible to look at, review, and say, no, this is the right direction, this is the wrong direction, etc.
Mr. Backen?
Madam Chair, yes, effectively that's correct based on past practice. Any council can direct it any way they wish. But generally, we would be going to prepare some information first, then go to the public, and then council would deliberate further, as opposed to going to the public with a wide open path and not knowing any of the constraints or directions of council, and then having to repeat the process. So that would be the past practice. Council could do as they see fit, but we would encourage council to continue with the practice of actually having something substantive to go to the public with.
So would that require a motion at the time that we receive the new proposals to go to the public, or could we embed that in a motion like this so that upon receipt it goes to public engagement immediately? Or is that something that you, based on best practice and staff knowledge, can just say, we're going to do it no matter what?
I guess the answer would be we can do it no matter what, as long as council authorizes us or agrees with that process. The challenge with embedding it is not the concept of participation, but it may be that someone comes back with a concept that's prohibitively expensive. So perhaps the answer is some sort of center here that costs significant dollars that we're not really prepared to consider. So generally it comes back from the public, from the staff report, to make sure we're on the right path, then to the public, then back to council, so those factors can be taken into consideration. And if staff have missed the mark by actually coming in with something that is completely inappropriate, then it may not be wise to authorize that to go to the public, as it may increase expectations in a direction that's really not acceptable to council.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
No other speakers? Did you want to, Councillor Richter?
I just think that there's a process. I saw a newsletter that came out just recently from, I think it was the Fort Langley Community Association, how they're starting some sort of a public input process. And of course, Fort Langley Community Association is one of the associations that gets grants from Township each year to consult with the public and provide council advice on. So I would like to make a motion that we refer this back to staff for more ideas on public consultation opportunities.
Do we have a second? I don't see a seconder.
I'll second it for discussion.
Yeah, there needs to be, and this same motion I'm going to actually bring forward as well for number 6 and number 7 with regards to public consultation. Over the years that I've been on this council or on council, Fort Langley is, as I said earlier, absolutely passionate. They need to be properly consulted before a decision is made to move in any one direction. And I'm worried that if we don't go through the courtesy of consulting with them, that we might end up doing something that they're not very happy with, and that it will rebound on us.
Your Worship.
Oh, so one sec. Okay, so we got Councillor Van Popta first.
Yeah, so I actually think that that's going to accomplish the opposite effect. I think we're going to have a lot of people who have already participated in the consultation of the city park amendments, and that they'll be insulted that we are now taking their information and their time and disregarding it and starting back from scratch again. And I think that that's very disrespectful to the youth who are engaged on this process already. And I think it's important that we validate the time and consideration that they put into this already and move ahead with it.
Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the seconding and this amendment, I'll be respecting the results of the vote on this occasion, and depending on how that goes, I won't be seconding it moving forward, just because I tend to agree with Councillor Van Popta. I think that we've got, especially for when it comes to the park, I think we've got the community engagement we need to start the process of coming up with a proposal, and then from there we can go back to the public and say, do you approve or not? And from there we can refine the proposal. I think it's high time we make some progress.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just thank you. Yeah, I think that there's been a considerable amount of input from the community for this item P5, and I know that there's a suggestion about 6 and 7 where I'm looking at the agenda, but there's both 6 and 7 have public information or public I guess, public process. So I just wanted to comment. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'm looking at the timeframes on this before, and the last time this came forward was 1 year ago. And I'm just looking at, I can understand if this thing was 5 years old or 10 years old, and Fort Langley has grown an awful lot in that time. But I'm just looking. This is 1 year ago. It's time to respect what's going on. I just had a walk through that park because I'm not from Fort Langley, and I was talking to the residents. They're amazingly friendly out there. They, when you ask their opinion, they don't hesitate in giving it to you. And I think, looking at this was 1 year ago, and let's move ahead. I support this.
So I'll just speak to it. So for me personally, took a lot of heat about the spray park, and there's lots of conversations about swimming pools. And so that's why we ended up doing going to the public, and staff worked really hard on a lot of the ideas. So I won't support this particular motion by Councillor Richter, but maybe for the Fort Langley waterfront project. But as Councillor Ferguson said, there looks like there is a public input opportunity. So I guess I'll just call the question. On the amendment? On the amendment, yes.
Can we just read it back?
Yeah.
So we know
Could you just repeat your the amendment?
The referral is to refer it back to staff for more ideas on public consultation methods prior to commencing.
Okay. So if I were to call the vote from here, is there anything more complicated than just pressing that button? Because I just called the vote, so let's just give it a shot.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sitting where I normally sit, so am I counted as Councillor or Mayor Woodward, or?
I've actually fixed that part.
Okay.
So are we voting?
1 sec. I can't find P. There we go.
Voting on the referral.
Okay, now you can all vote.
Opposed to the referral.
So it looks like it fails with Councillor Richter in favor, or all of us. Never mind. I got to do a little more practicing. You can all see who voted. Okay, so do I close the results now and move on? Okay, so now on to the main motion, and I will call the vote unless there's any more discussion. Call the vote. And it passes with everyone voting in favor. All right, so moving on to the next, P7, no, P6, Fort Langley Waterfront Project. Would you like to move?
Yes, I'll like to move, and I'll read. I'm going to jump down to the whereas.
We'll just need a seconder.
Oh, seconder, sorry.
Would anyone like to second? Councillor Bailey is second. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll read the third whereas. There have been multiple attempts over many years, to renew the waterfront area of Fort Langley, with multiple processes of public input completed, contemplating an overall public benefit and utility. Therefore, be it resolved that Council hereby pre-approves $250,000 within the 2023 budget from the Capital Projects Reserve to enable the initiation, design, and required project pre-works to complete a Fort Langley waterfront project concept, including, but not necessarily limited to, site surveys, geotechnical analysis, tree assessments, off-site and on-site civil infrastructure, and other items that may be required to review. And further, be it resolved that staff shall report to Council with a design concept to be funded within the 2024 budget process, with recommendations as may be appropriate for Council to consider, to solicit public input via a public open houses or other feedback processes, with potential commencement within 2024. And then I'd like to speak to it.
Okay.
So the waterfront has been attempted over many years, or many different different ways of trying to do it. There's been community groups that have come up with some concepts. There's been a past township applicant that has come up with a concept. There were engagement opportunities at that time. And this is Langley's only waterfront property. And we have an amazing opportunity here to really make this something that the community can be proud of. And I think with what I'm trying to accomplish with my motion is that it's a very sensitive area. We've got some setbacks from train tracks. We've got setbacks from the waterfront and DFO. What we can build there is going to be very difficult because of the type of land that it is, how it's positioned. And so I think it's important that we just do a lot of pre-work before we start, that we understand what we're working with. And so once we know what we're working with and what's available to build on and how we can accomplish reaching, I believe I calculated 14 different stakeholders on this piece of property. And I'm just super excited that we're going to be able to listen to all of them and to hear what they envision for this piece of land. And so I'm just excited to finally see some love going into Fort Langley.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
This is probably the most difficult one that I've hit in my brief time on council here. I like the first part of this resolved, because you do have to find out what can you do with it before you do anything with it. And looking into it, fully support. The second part is a little trickier. And I went to an FLCA meeting there last week, and I see on their agenda tomorrow that they've got this on the agenda. And I really want to make sure that organizations like the Fort Langley Community Association, the rowing associations, and all of the identified, not only the identified organizations that will use this waterfront, but also that the people in Fort Langley themselves can have input into this thing, because I live in South Langley. I sure as hell don't want to tell the people in Fort Langley what they're going to do with their property. Okay, I would much rather go and listen, and tomorrow night I'm going to listen. It might be a tough one, but I want to go. I want to hear what the people in Fort Langley say about their waterfront. So I really stress that everyone in Fort Langley who wants to talk about this be given a chance to have input on what their waterfront's going to look like.
Councillor Van Popta. Oh, sorry. Actually, Councillor Pratt was first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And similar to Councillor Bailey, I appreciate Councillor Van Popta bringing this to my attention as early as you could in regards to thoughts that I had. Question through yourself, Your Worship, to staff in regards to the monies that are allocated still in the capital reserve or capital projects reserve. Is the reconfiguration of all these reserves as a result of what we voted on earlier in the contributions to capital adjustment, is that going to have any impact on where this $250,000 is coming from? And will that in any way preclude us from including it in the 2023 budget, or is that going to have an impact on next year's? Because I understand that the purpose would be to include the actual funding of the full project next year, but do we have the actual money to do it, all the pre-work this year?
Oh, Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it is consistent with the revised, structure. Again, we simply are going to have the same amount of funds available, but they'll be in fewer buckets, if you will, fewer envelopes, so it's more easier to manage. In that regard, okay, then that should allow us to fund this and undertake the works if this motion is successful.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta.
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor Bailey and Councillor Pratt, for your comments. And I think that's specifically why that the motion is worded this way, is because there's going to be many different ways that we engage everybody within the community. just to pigeon toe it as just only open public houses. We've got the line item, other feedback process. So, that can be developed many different ways. I encourage all the residents to reach out if they don't go through the FLCA or if they don't go through a rowing club, that if they're just just a resident within Fort Langley, there's going to be many ways for people to participate. And just to leave it kind of to find out what is going to work best for Fort Langley is why it's worded as it is.
Okay, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, okay, well, this is $250,000 that we're gonna put into a plan that we're then gonna, if I'm reading this correctly, that we're then gonna take to the public after we've put it in the 2024 budget process. It seems to me the cart is coming before the horse here. And so therefore, I'd like to make another referral motion to staff for ideas on public consultation methods prior to actually spending the $250,000 on a plan. Let's see and hear what Fort Langley wants there. What we've had so far is a design that came from a private developer and then a design that came from another private developer. And we really haven't heard what the public wants to see happen there. And I think we need to do that first.
Okay, got a couple more speakers. Councillor Ferguson, I guess, first. Yeah. Did you? Oh.
Your mic's not on.
There I go. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Coots. Yes, I think this is an interesting motion, an interesting opportunity, because this issue and this piece of land is being talked about for many, many years, and there's all sorts of different plans we've looked at. I think finally somebody is saying that, look, if we're going to do something with a piece of land, you better get an idea of what you're dealing with. And I guess my statement or my question is, we have to, if I may through the chair, we have to get an idea of how much setback the Fraser River is going to have. That's in the Department of Environment, and how much the setback the railway company is going to want, and also potential flooding and other matters. Would that be the case, if I may, through the chair?
Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Effectively, yes. I think what the intent of this motion is, and I do stand to be corrected, is to advance the process, given the lengthy history of, I guess, concepts that have been put in place for that property, to effectively hire a third-party professional, an architect or some similar consultant to actually initiate the process and come up with the, I guess, some concepts that they feel is appropriate given the setbacks and the restraints that are there from the river and the rail, and as well to look at the history that's in place and then to bring those forward for council's, again, edification, and at that same time make recommendations as to the public input process that should thereafter follow. Because that process may be iterative. It may mean that we go back again a few times, or it may be that it's widely accepted. That's something that would depend very much upon, I think, the work of the professionals in this instance when we're looking at the history and as well the input they've received to date.
So I'll just ask you, if I may through a chair again, a supplemental question. Knowing the fact that there's been other applications in the past, would staff have a little bit of background information existing already on it? And knowing that, would that reduce the fact that our costs, we're asking for 250, it may indeed not be 250 because there indeed might be, staff might have already have quite a bit of information to date, if I may?
That's correct. I think the technical information exists by and large. I think why the number is as significant as it is because of the public consultation aspect of it and the time that will take. I know there'll certainly be costs for the concepts and the review of the history and whatnot, but in the past we've seen such concepts done for significantly less, but when we start to involve a public process, as this contemplates in the last paragraph, it is going to add some additional cost to the matter.
So, Deputy Mayor Kuntz, my only last question to you or statement would be the fact that, on one point we're asking for design concept and appropriate to council so we can get the factual and environmental and scientific information. And then it says right in here in the motion, solicit public input as Councillor Bailey, Councillor Van Pop, and others have mentioned via open houses or other feedback. So get as many folks as possible, but there's no sense getting information on something that they can't do. If you can't build things, if you can't design things, if you can't use the land for certain purposes, then we might as well get the facts information in front of us so we can ask the public for input. So I think it's all in the motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pratt. I'm not sure, I'm not keeping track of how many times people have spoken, so
Are we speaking to the referral motion, or are we speaking?
I don't think I took a motion yet
Oh,
for
okay.
referral. So,
Okay.
okay. So go ahead, Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. And I guess this question might be because of something Mr. Backen just raised, and I apologize if I misunderstood. The $250,000 that we're pre-approving in this year's budget, by my reading of the motion, that clause doesn't include public engagement until after the design and pre-project works are completed. So that $250,000 doesn't include any public engagement as far as I understand the motion. The public engagement would occur in 2024 once we have, by my reading in this, funded the project in the 2024 budget. So maybe it's my misreading or maybe misunderstanding of the motion, but can we confirm whether or not that $250,000 does include some public engagement prior to any iterations of a proposal coming to council?
Mr. Backen?
Effectively, that's correct. I think where their confusion lies in terms of the scope of the $250,000. The $250,000, by my interpretation, is designed to take us from the beginning of the process with the public, with the professionals and some concepts to council, and then through the council to the other side to actually have someone conduct the open houses or public input sessions that should exist. You're quite correct that if the process was to be halted by council, say after the concepts came forward because it envisioned something inappropriate, let's say it was a 50-story tower on the waterfront or something that would be impossible, then that would mean we'd have some surplus left over from that initiative that would return to the project. If, however, it was acceptable, we would anticipate we would still have the monies available to us to engage the public through that process, and then to come back, and it would be at that point additional funds would need to be levied or located to determine what the ultimate project may look like.
So as a supplemental to that, if I understand correctly, in order to have any public engagement that's meaningful, in my opinion, we would need to show the public something for them to imagine. So this pre-project work, which includes the $250,000 envelope, will give us something to show the public, and that public engagement is included before we even contemplate adding anything into the 2024 budget of any substance, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so for me, I guess, thanks for the clarification. I didn't really want to do anything without that public consultation first, so that's going to all be part of the $250,000. I just need that clarified.
The scope of the project is $250,000, as we understand it, is just to come from concept professionals. If council then says, yes, this is something we're prepared to consider, then to the public, and then to make a determination after that.
Okay. Is there any other? Okay, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm still thinking we need to talk to the community before we spend money on a concept thing. So I'm going to put forward my motion again that we refer this back to staff for ideas on public consultation prior to moving forward with spending the $250,000.
Okay, I'll second that. Do we have any, does anybody want to speak to the referral motion? Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I don't think this is fair, and I'm going to vote against this referral because this is a hot area politically, and I don't expect people to waste their time and effort without knowing what they can and what they cannot do. I think the people of Fort Langley are well worth $250,000. and given them the information about what is possible and what is not possible. You know, like Mr. Backen said, you know, what if someone wants to put a 50-meter swimming pool there and it's not possible? So I want to get to the main motion, defeat this referral, and let the people of Fort Langley know that this council is willing to get serious about their waterfront and to support them and to give them the best opportunity to make the best decisions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. I understand and respect the actual amendment. I think it's a little bit early. I think that it's in the motion that we will be consulting the public. I think it's very, very important to get the factual information. And I think in the building community, they called it the building envelope and what they can build on, where over the years, I always get phone calls. Well, I have an acre of land. I should be able to build an acre's worth of development, and a creek runs through it or something like that. So it's good to have the factual information. And this is the Rail and River, as the administrator said, although that's one of my favorite restaurants in Fort Langley, the Rail and River. But anyway, I think that the motion is not needed at this point in time, so I can't support it. It's already in the notice of motion is filed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just get that up for discussion. I have confidence that staff will be reaching out to the different community groups in Fort Langley, so I won't support the referral, but I guess I'll call the question on that.
On the referral.
On the referral.
Opposed to the referral?
Yeah. And it fails. So anyway, do I have to say anything else?
Now the original motion?
Oh, yeah, going, so let's call the question on the original vote.
I'm sorry, Councillor Coates?
Yes.
If we could please get those that were opposed, it didn't come up on the screen this time.
Oh, it didn't, it said that we're all in favor on this. No? Okay, so on my screen, it said they're all in favor. Okay.
You were in favor and all were opposed. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the main motion, and I'll just call the question on the main motion. Like, to me, it's all coming up as, okay, Councillor Pratt, sorry, it's because Councillor Woodward's not here either. He's over here. It says that we're all in favor. Okay, Councillor Richter is not, but on my screen it says that she is, so.
I think the challenge is you have to say complete the vote. So what you've got
That's
there.
why,
Yeah,
okay.
What you've got there is simply
Vote
saying that everyone
completed.
voted.
Okay, so, well, there we go. I need a lesson on the technology here, so. Okay, so going on to the next one.
Now, Madam Chair, we
Sorry.
also need to be mindful of the time, as we do have another meeting starting after
Okay.
this as well.
Okay, so.
This is the last one, right?
Yeah, this is the last one. P7, New Fort Langley Heritage Streetscape Plan. You need a mover? Oh, sorry, go like that. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Van Pata.
Yeah, so I move this and I'll speak to it after.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Pratt seconds.
Okay, so therefore, I'll just move to the therefores. Therefore, be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to report to council regarding an update to the Fort Langley Heritage Streetscape Plan, including but not necessarily limited to a terms of reference, budgetary requirements, and timelines required for public input for council to consider. And as I speak to this, the original design for the streetscapes of Fort Langley was from 2001. And it's never been acted upon. Fort Langley is the birthplace of British Columbia, and it's one of the, as much as I love my village, it's not, in terms of streetscape, anything to be excited about. You can go into other communities like Haney or Steveston or Ladner, and you can see some amazing streetscapes in terms of lamp standards and lighting and sidewalk repairs and just an overall comprehensive plan. And this Fort Langley needs this, especially with the dissolving of the Fort Langley BIA. It's time for Township to pick this back up and to get this back on the table.
Okay, we have Councillor Ferguson?
No. I'm
Okay,
not,
you were on my screen, so Councillor Richter?
Is the intent of this motion to include costs in the report?
It's budgetary.
Because it's not going to be cheap.
Mr. Backen?
I would defer, thank you, Your Worship. I would defer to the mover, but I do believe it's intended to include the necessary costs to advance the matter.
So costs will be included before it actually gets approved. So we're going to have a report that comes and talks about the costs, the timelines, terms of reference, public input, et cetera.
That's correct. My understanding, it directs staff to report to council regarding an update and then includes the items you referenced.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see anyone else on the speakers list, so I will call the question on the motion. So I'm going to complete the vote. Vote completed.
Now you know it, Councillor or Mayor would do.
Okay, so it's not working for me, so anyway. Did we, sorry?
Are any members opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I believe we can adjourn the meeting until, no?
A motion to terminate?
Oh, motion
Sorry.
to terminate.
Sorry, I need a motion to go into closed, please.
Okay, so motion to go into close, Councillor Martin's first, and anyone, can we get a seconder? Councillor Bailey, all in favor? Carries. And we will now.
Now we need a motion to terminate.
And now a motion to terminate. Councillor Martins and Councillor Rind, and a motion, who wants to say the word terminate?
Terminate.
Okay, there we go.
And Madam Chair, when do you wish to
my.
recall the next meeting? It'll be in this forum, it has to be in this room because of the,
Next week, Monday, just kidding.
what time, shall we say 5:10?
Sure, yeah, 5:10 sounds good.
We're meeting here for?
Yeah, because we're in Zoom, we're Zooming in
right,
special closed, yeah.
Our
Sorry, guys.
Oh, here.
There, you did it. Good. Okay.
Clear.
I didn't know if that was you or Wendy.
Oh, I can't wait till you guys get to do this one day.
I'm sorry he was sitting right there. I'm sorry he was sitting right there. Front and center. It bothered me. I'm sorry. I was trying to send you love. Could you feel it?
Sure, honestly, it doesn't.
No, I know.
Don't let
I
people
just
like
don't-
that intimidated.